The Great Assembly floated in the void between galaxies, a massive structure built from the combined efforts of 2,000 civilizations. Its walls were made of crystallized starlight, and its chambers stretched across dimensions that smaller species could not even perceive. Today, those ancient halls trembled with fear. Ambassador Chen Wei walked through corridors that had witnessed 10,000 years of peace. Her shoes clicked against floors that had been polished smooth by countless alien appendages. Around her, species from across known space rushed in panicked clusters. The Kelthari, tall beings of pure energy, flickered with anxiety. The quorum delegates, massive creatures with bodies like floating mountains, spoke in deep rumbles that shook the air. Even the eternal minds, ancient artificial intelligences housed in crystal matrices, showed signs of distress in their pulsing lights. Chen had only been humanity's representative for 3 months. Her species had joined the Galactic Council just 5 years ago, barely noticed among civilizations that had mastered space travel before Earth's dinosaurs walked. Most elder species still considered humans to be children playing with toys they barely understood. She entered the grand chamber where the emergency session was already underway. The room was enormous, designed to accommodate species of vastly different sizes and environmental needs. Some delegates floated in tanks of methane. Others existed as patterns of sound in carefully maintained acoustic fields. The Kelthari ascendancy held the floor, their speaker a being of golden light named Threshold of Knowing. Another 17 systems have fallen, Threshold of Knowing announced. Their voice like wind through crystal chimes. The Voidborn advance continues. They do not conquer. They do not occupy. They erase. A holographic display filled the center of the chamber. Chen watched as star systems simply vanished from the map, replaced by spreading darkness. It was not the darkness of empty space. It was something worse, something hungry. How many does that make? Asked Representative Column of the Granite Speakers, his rock-based form grinding with distress. 4,216 worlds, answered the chamber's central intelligence. Approximately 41% of known space. The rate of loss is accelerating. Chen had studied the reports obsessively since humanity learned of the Voidborn 3 weeks ago. The enemy had appeared 30 years earlier at the galaxy's edge. At first, they seemed like any other hostile force. The elder civilizations had sent their fleets confident in weapons refined over millennia. Those fleets never returned. The worlds they defended simply disappeared, torn from reality by dimensional rifts that swallowed everything within light years. The Kelthari ascendancy had been the greatest power in the galaxy for 8,000 years. Their technology could manipulate gravity, create artificial suns, and fold space itself. They threw everything at the Voidborn. Their weapons passed through the enemy like light through glass. Their shields offered no protection. Entire battle groups vanished in seconds, pulled into tears in reality that closed behind them like hungry mouths. The quorum of eternal minds had tried next. These ancient artificial intelligences could process information at speeds that made time itself seem slow. They analyzed patterns, predicted movements, created weapons designed specifically for the Voidborn's unique energy signatures. Nothing worked. The enemy adapted instantly to every strategy, every weapon, every defense. "We must consider evacuation," said a delegate from the Spiral Collective, their voice emerging from a swarm of small flying creatures that moved as one. "We could retreat to the Andromeda Galaxy, establish new, and abandon 4,000 worlds." Threshold of Knowing flared brighter with anger. "Abandon trillions of lives? We are the elder races. We have survived since the galaxy was young. We do not flee. Then what do you propose?" The question came from elder stone that dreams of the Granite Speakers. "We have tried force. We have tried intelligence. We have tried everything our combined wisdom can devise. The Voidborn are not just defeating us, they are erasing us from existence. Our people, our worlds, our very history disappears when they strike." The chamber fell silent. Chen had been listening carefully, taking notes on her small datapad. She raised her hand, the human gesture lost on many species, but the Council's systems recognized her request to speak. "The chair recognizes the human delegation," the Central Intelligence announced. Thousands of alien eyes, sensors and consciousness fields turned toward her. Chen felt very small. She stood and walked to the speaker's platform, her heart pounding. "Ambassador Chen Wei of Earth," she said, her voice amplified across the chamber. "Humanity offers its military forces to assist in the defense." The chamber erupted, not with hope, but with what could only be described as condescending amusement. A Keltari near the front made a sound like tinkling bells. Their species equivalent of laughter. No offense intended. Young one. Threshold of Knowing said with barely concealed contempt. But your species has barely left your home star system. You have been traveling between stars for less than a century. The Keltari have fought wars longer than your entire civilization has existed. What could you possibly offer? Chen had expected this. She had prepared for it. We offer a fresh perspective. You said yourself that ancient wisdom has failed. Perhaps you need new thinking. New thinking? Another delegate spoke up. A quorum representative whose voice was pure mathematics translated into sound. We have computational capacity that exceeds your entire species' brain matter by factors of trillions. We have considered every possibility, every approach, every theoretical framework. There is no fresh perspective we have not already explored. Then why are you still losing? Chen asked quietly. The chamber went silent. It was a rude question by Galactic Council standards, dangerously close to insult. But it was also true. The human makes a point, Elder Stone That Dreams rumbled. We are the wisest species in the galaxy, yet we are being systematically destroyed by an enemy we do not understand. Perhaps wisdom has made us rigid. Rigid? Threshold of Knowing's light pulsed with indignation. We have adapted our tactics 17,000 times. We have created weapons that did not exist before this war. We have explored strategies that violate our most sacred principles. If that is rigid, then the warning alarms cut through the debate. Red lights flashed across every surface. The chamber's central intelligence spoke in an urgent tone that Chen had never heard before. Dimensional tier forming. Distance 2 light seconds. The Voidborn are here. The chamber dissolved into chaos. Delegates rushed for exits. Emergency shields activated, but everyone present knew they were useless. The Voidborn did not care about shields. Chen watched the holographic display as space itself seemed to tear open just outside the station. Through the rift something moved. Not ships exactly. More like shapes that hurt to look at, as if reality itself was rejecting their presence. Chen's security detail, a team of 6 human soldiers led by Captain Maria Santos, immediately moved to surround her. Santos was a compact woman with scars across her face and eyes that had seen too much combat. Ambassador, we need to evacuate now, Santos said, her hand already on Chen's arm. Wait, Chen said, watching the display. Captain, do you see how they're moving? Ma'am, with respect, we don't have time for— They're hesitating, Chen interrupted. Look at the pattern. They come through the rift, pause, then advance, like they're waiting for something. Santos looked at the display, her tactical mind engaging despite the urgency. You're right. There's a 3-second delay after emergence, like they're scanning or receiving orders. Can we disrupt that? Santos's eyes widened. You want to engage them? Ma'am, every species here has said that's suicide. Every species here is running. Captain, your weapons. They use quantum disruption fields, don't they? For armor penetration, yes, but fire at the rift during that delay. Not at the Voidborn, at the tear itself. Santos hesitated for only a second, then spoke into her communicator. All units target the spatial anomaly. Quantum disruption on my mark. Firing pattern Delta 7. The human security team was small. Just 6 soldiers with weapons that looked primitive compared to the energy cannons and matter disruptors other species carried. But they were disciplined and fast. They raised their weapons and fired in perfect synchronization. The effect was immediate and unexpected. The rift flickered. The Voidborn shapes that had been emerging froze, as if the connection between dimensions had been interrupted. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the rift collapsed in on itself and the Voidborn vanished. The grand chamber fell completely silent. Every delegate, every intelligence, every consciousness present stared at the 6 human soldiers and their primitive weapons. Threshold of Knowing spoke first, their voice quiet and filled with something Chen had never heard from them before. Uncertainty. They drove them back. The humans drove them back? We didn't drive them back, Santos said, lowering her weapon. We disrupted their entry portal. They'll be back. But we bought some time. Elder Stone That Dreams moved forward, his massive form causing the floor to crack slightly under his weight. In 30 years of warfare, no species has successfully defended against a Voidborn assault. They appear and worlds die, yet you, with weapons we would consider outdated, managed to disrupt their attack. How? demanded the quorum representative. Our calculations showed that such an approach would be ineffective. We modeled quantum disruption fields against dimensional rifts. The energy requirements should have been orders of magnitude higher than your weapons could produce. We didn't try to close the rift, Chen said, understanding now what her team had done. We just made it unstable. She searched for an analogy. Like static on a communication channel. We couldn't stop the signal, but we could make it too noisy to use. The chamber's central intelligence spoke up. Analysis confirms the hypothesis. The human weapons created quantum interference patterns that destabilized the dimensional breach. The Voidborn could not maintain the connection. However, this appears to be more luck than strategy. The humans had no way of knowing this would work. Actually, Santos said, we did. Sort of. We've been studying the report since we learned about the Voidborn. We noticed that they always enter through rifts, and those rifts stay open during their attacks. It seemed like a vulnerability. In human military history, we have a saying, if the enemy has to keep a door open, blow up the doorway. Chen felt a surge of pride in her species. They were young, yes. They were inexperienced in galactic terms, but they had something the elder species had perhaps forgotten. The ability to see problems with fresh eyes. Threshold of knowing dimmed and brightened several times, a sign of deep thought in their species. When they spoke, the condescension was gone from their voice. Ambassador Chen Wei of Earth, humanity's offer of military assistance is accepted. We will need to study your tactics, your weapons, and your thinking. If you can disrupt one attack, perhaps you can teach us to disrupt others. There is more to learn here than tactics. Elderstone that dreams added. The humans saw a pattern we missed. They acted on incomplete information and succeeded where our certainty failed. Perhaps we have been too focused on what we know cannot work. We have forgotten to try what might work. The emergency session transformed into a strategy meeting. For the first time in 30 years, the Galactic Council spoke not of evacuation or despair, but of possibilities. Chen found herself at the center of it all. A representative of the youngest species in the galaxy, suddenly thrust into a position of importance. As the meeting continued into the station's artificial night, Santos approached Chen quietly. Ma'am, you know that was mostly luck, right? We disrupted one attack. There's no guarantee we can do it again. I know, Captain, Chen replied, watching the elder species debate with renewed energy. But right now they don't need guarantees. They need hope. They need someone to show them that the Voidborn can be resisted. And if we fail? Chen looked at the star map, at the spreading darkness that represented the Voidborn's advance. She thought of Earth, of humanity's short but intense history, of all the times her species had faced impossible odds. Then we fail trying something new rather than succeeding at giving up. That has to count for something. In the depths of space far from the Great Assembly, the Voidborn regrouped. The dimensional rift had been disrupted, but they would return. They always did. They had erased thousands of civilizations. What was one more? But for the first time in 30 years, they had been stopped, even briefly. And in the cosmic game of war and survival, even a brief pause could change everything. Humanity had entered the stage. The galaxy was watching, and nothing would ever be the same. The terminus front was where hope went to die. 3 months ago, it had been a thriving sector with 40 inhabited systems and trade routes that connected 3 major civilizations. Now it was a graveyard. 30 of those systems were simply gone, replaced by the spreading void that marked Voidborn territory. The remaining 10 were under siege, defended by a combined fleet of over 3,000 ships from a dozen different species. They had been trapped there for 67 days. Admiral Kwame Osei stood on the bridge of the UHSS Endurance, humanity's newest battleship. Around him, his crew moved with quiet efficiency, monitoring systems and coordinating with the other human vessels in their small fleet. 200 ships. That was all humanity could spare for this mission. The elder species had sent thousands. Admiral, the Kelthari battle group is requesting our position in the defensive formation, Commander Jackson reported from the tactical station. Kwame looked at the fleet display. The Allied forces were arranged in layers, with the most powerful ships at the front. The Kelthari energy vessels, capable of channeling starfire. The Quorum fortress ships, mobile planets with computational power that could predict enemy movements. The Granite Speaker world ships, asteroids carved into battle stations that could shrug off planet-killing weapons. And in the back, marked with what could only be described as visual dismissal, the human fleet. 200 small vessels that looked like toys compared to the elder species' magnificent warships. "Tell them we'll take a forward position," Kwame said calmly. The bridge went quiet. Commander Jackson turned to look at him. "Sir, did you say forward?" "You heard correctly, Commander. Request permission to form the vanguard." "Admiral, with respect, the Kelthari will laugh at us. They've already made it clear they expect us to provide support fire at best." Kwame smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Then let's give them something to think about besides laughter. Send the request." The response came back in less than a minute. Threshold of Knowing's voice filled the bridge, transmitted across the fleet communication network. "Human Admiral Osei, your offer is appreciated but unnecessary. The vanguard position requires vessels capable of withstanding sustained void-borne assault. No offense intended, but your fleet lacks the defensive capabilities for such a role." "None taken," Kwame replied. "But we're not asking to defend, we're asking to observe. We want to study the void-borne up close." There was a pause. "Study them? Admiral, we have been fighting the void-borne for 30 years. We have gathered more data than your species could analyze in centuries. What could you possibly learn that we have not?" "Maybe nothing," Kwame admitted. "But Ambassador Chen disrupted a void-borne attack by looking at it differently. We'd like to try the same approach. If we fail, you lose 200 ships you didn't think were useful anyway. If we succeed, everyone benefits." Another pause, longer this time. Kwame could imagine the debate happening on the Kelthari command ship. Finally, Threshold of Knowing responded. "Very well. The human fleet will take forward observation position, but we will not risk the formation to rescue you if you are overrun." "Understood. We don't expect you to." The human fleet moved forward, slipping through the gaps in the massive elder species formations. As they passed the Keltharia vessels, Kwame saw the energy beings watching them. He could not read their expressions, but he could imagine what they were thinking. Young species. Foolish. Brave perhaps, but doomed. Let them think it. Kwame had not told them the real reason he wanted a forward position. It was not just to observe. It was because the human fleet carried something the elder species did not. Dr. Yuki Tanaka and her research team. Tanaka was on the Endurance now, in a laboratory that had been hastily converted from a cargo bay. She was a small woman with gray hair and eyes that seemed to look through things rather than at them. She had been studying the void-borne data for 3 weeks straight, barely sleeping, driven by an obsession that Kwame recognized because he shared it. He found her surrounded by holographic displays showing dimensional mathematics that made his head hurt. "Dr. Tanaka, we're in position," he said. She did not look up from her work. "Good. I need live data. The recordings the elder species provided are too filtered. They run everything through their analysis systems before storing it. I need raw observations." "What are you looking for?" "Proof of a theory." She finally looked at him, and Kwame saw exhaustion and excitement fighting in her expression. "Admiral, what if the Voidborn are not invincible? What if they're just somewhere else?" "I'm not sure I follow." Tanaka gestured at one of the displays which showed a diagram of layered space. "Our universe exists in 3 spatial dimensions, but quantum theory has suggested for centuries that there are more dimensions we cannot perceive. What if the Voidborn exist partially in those other dimensions? When our weapons pass through them, it's not because they're intangible. It's because most of their mass is somewhere we can't hit." Kwame felt his pulse quicken. Like a shadow. If you try to punch a shadow on a wall, your fist goes right through because the real object is somewhere else. Exactly. And, if I'm right, then the dimensional rifts they use to travel are not just portals. They're bridges. The Voidborn are pulling our universe toward theirs, or vice versa. That's why worlds disappear. They're not being destroyed. They're being relocated to wherever the Voidborn exist. Can you prove this? Not with filtered data. I need to measure the dimensional frequency of an active rift. And for that I need to be close. Very close. Kwame understood now why she had pushed so hard for this mission. How close? close enough that the rift's energy field is measurable above background radiation, approximately 1,000 kilometers. Doctor, at that range will be inside their weapons envelope. I know. She met his eyes. But if I'm right, we can find them. And if we can find them, we can fight them. The Voidborn attacked 6 hours later. The fleet's sensors detected the dimensional tear forming at the edge of the terminus front. It was massive, larger than any rift recorded before. Threshold of Knowing's voice echoed across all command channels. All vessels, defensive formation. Prepare for assault. The Elder Species ships moved with practiced precision. Energy shields activated. Weapons charged. It was a dance they had performed countless times, always with the same result. The Voidborn would emerge, weapons would fail to stop them, and ships would die. But this time the human fleet moved differently. Instead of falling back to defensive positions, they accelerated forward. Human fleet, you are moving in the wrong direction, Threshold of Knowing transmitted urgently. Retreat to support positions immediately. Negative, Kwame replied calmly. We're going to take some readings. Admiral Osei, that is suicide. Probably, but we're doing it anyway. All ships, maintain formation. Full sensor sweep. Dr. Tanaka, you're up. In the laboratory, Tanaka was strapped into a chair surrounded by instruments that hummed with power. She had custom-built most of them from parts scavenged from human and alien technology. The Elder Species would have considered them primitive. She considered them perfect. The rift tore open space like a wound. Through it, the Voidborn emerged. Kwame had seen the recordings, but nothing prepared him for seeing them in person. They were not ships in any conventional sense. They were shapes that hurt to look at, geometries that should not exist in three-dimensional space. They moved without propulsion, advanced without acceleration. They simply were where they had not been a moment before. The human fleet raced toward them. Distance to Rift, 3,000 kilometers, Commander Jackson reported. His voice was steady, but Kwame could hear the tension underneath. 2,500. Sir, they're targeting us. Evasive pattern Delta, don't stop our approach. The Voidborn weapons fire was unlike anything Kwame had ever seen. It was not energy beams or projectiles. It was more like reality itself was being unwritten. Where the weapons struck, matter simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris, just absence. 2 human ships vanished in the first volley. Then 3 more. The fleet did not slow down. 1,000 kilometers, Jackson said. Doctor, I hope you're getting what you need. In the lab, Tanaka was surrounded by data streams that poured in faster than any human could process. But she had designed her instruments to look for specific patterns, specific frequencies. And there, buried in the chaos of battle and the screaming of torn space, she found it. A signature. A frequency. A mathematical pattern that repeated across multiple dimensional layers. Got it, she breathed. Admiral, I have what we need. Get us out of here. All ships full reverse, Kwame ordered. Evasive pattern Omega. The human fleet scattered, each ship moving independently, making themselves difficult targets. It was a tactic the Elder Species had never tried because their massive ships could not maneuver that way. But human vessels were small and agile. They danced between the Voidborn weapons fire, losing ships but not formation. Behind them, the Elder Species fleet engaged. Weapons that could vaporize planets struck the Voidborn and passed through harmlessly. Shields that could withstand supernova shockwaves failed in seconds. It was the same story it had always been, except now the Voidborn seemed agitated. They had never had prey run toward them before, had never had anything get that close and survive. Their pattern changed. Instead of their usual methodical advance, they pushed forward more aggressively, chasing the retreating human ships. They're following us, Jackson observed. Why are they following us? Because we scared them, Kwame said with grim satisfaction. We did something unexpected. We got close. We survived, and that makes us a threat. The human fleet made it back to the Elder Species lines with only 42 ships lost. It was a devastating casualty rate by any measure. But they had achieved their goal. They had the data. Over the next 18 hours, while the Voidborn assault continued and the Elder Species fought their usual holding action, Tanaka worked. She barely spoke, barely ate, barely acknowledged the existence of anything outside her laboratory. Kwame had guards posted to make sure she at least drank water. When she finally emerged, the battle had been raging for a full day. The Allied fleet had lost 200 ships. The Voidborn had not lost any, because no one could figure out how to actually damage them. Tanaka went straight to the bridge. She looked worse than before, if that was possible, but her eyes were bright with discovery. "I found them," she said without preamble. Kwame turned from the tactical display.
Found what?
"The Voidborn. I found where they are." She brought up her data on the main display. It was a complex diagram that looked like space folded in on itself multiple times. They exist in a parallel dimensional layer. Not a separate universe exactly, more like a frequency we don't normally interact with. Imagine. She gestured, trying to find words for mathematical concepts that had no easy translation. Imagine that reality is like a radio signal. We exist on one frequency. The Voidborn exist on a frequency just slightly different. When they create rifts, they're not traveling. They're tuning. They're adjusting their frequency to match ours temporarily. "If you can find their frequency," Kwame said slowly, "can you track them?" "Better than that. I can follow them." "Follow them where?" "Home." Tanaka pulled up another display, this one showing the trajectory of Voidborn movements over the past 30 years. Every time they attack, they eventually retreat back through the rifts. The elder species assumed those rifts led nowhere, or led to random points in space. But they're wrong. The rifts all lead to the same place, a dimensional pocket, a space that exists adjacent to our universe. That's where the Voidborn live. That's their home. Kwame stared at the data. "You want to go there. I want to put a tracker through there." "These rifts are bridges, Admiral. And bridges go both ways. The elder species will never approve something so risky." Tanaka smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Then don't ask for approval. Ask for forgiveness later," Kwame considered. He had spent 30 years in military service. He had followed orders, respected the chain of command, done everything by the book. But the book had been written for normal wars against normal enemies. This was not a normal war. "Commander Jackson," he said slowly, "prepare a stealth package. Smallest drone we have, maximum sensor capacity. Coat it with quantum dampening fields, sir. We're going to let the Voidborn win a battle, and we're going to follow them home." The plan was simple in concept, but difficult in execution. The human fleet would engage the Voidborn in what appeared to be a desperate attack. They would fight hard enough to be believable, but not so hard that they could not retreat. And when they retreated, they would leave behind a gift. The elder species commanders were outraged when Kwame proposed it. "You want to lose intentionally?" Threshold of Knowing demanded. "Admiral, we have lost enough already. We do not need to hand the Voidborn victories." "It's not a victory if we learn something from it," Kwame argued. "We need to know where they go. Every time they retreat, they take knowledge of our defenses, our capabilities. Why shouldn't we learn something about them?" "Because they kill everything that gets close to them." "Not everything. We proved that. We got close. We survived. We can do it again." The argument raged for hours. In the end, Elderstone that Dreams cast the deciding vote. "Let the humans try. They have surprised us before. Perhaps they will do so again. And if they fail, we are no worse off than we were." 3 days later, the human fleet staged their attack. They hit a Voidborn formation at the Kepler Nexus, a resource-rich system the enemy had been systematically consuming. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Human ships danced and dodged, fired weapons they knew would not work, and put on a show of desperate resistance, and when they retreated, falling back in what looked like panicked disorder, they left behind something small, something the Voidborn would not notice among the debris of destroyed ships and the chaos of torn space. A drone, no larger than a fist, coated in materials that bent sensor waves around it, equipped with a dimensional tracker that would record whatever frequency the Voidborn shifted to when they retreated. The Voidborn consumed the Kepler Nexus. They tore the planets apart, pulled the star itself into a dimensional rift and erased the system from existence. Then, as they always did, they retreated through their portal, and the drone went with them. For 3 seconds, the drone's signal was clear. Then it crossed the dimensional threshold and vanished from all conventional sensors. But Tanaka's equipment, tuned to the specific frequency she had discovered, could still detect it. Faint, distorted, but present. She tracked it for 17 minutes before the signal died. 17 minutes was not long, but it was long enough to triangulate a location, to establish a coordinate, to mark a point in space-time dimension that could be found again. Tanaka looked at Kwame with tears in her eyes. We found it. We found their home. Kwame stared at the data. Somewhere in that dimensional pocket, in that space that existed alongside their universe, the Voidborn lived. For 30 years they had attacked with impunity, safe in the knowledge that no one could reach them. For 30 years, the galaxy had fought a defensive war, always reactive, never able to strike back. But now they had an address. Dr. Tanaka, Kwame said quietly. How many people in the galaxy know about dimensional travel? Theoretically, thousands. Practically, maybe a dozen. It's considered possible but suicidal. Every civilization that tried it either failed or never came back. Then I suppose we're going to be civilization number 13. In the depths of space, in layers of reality the elder species could barely imagine, the Voidborn did not know they had been tracked. They did not know that their home had been found. They had been the hunters for so long they had forgotten what it felt like to be prey. But they were about to remember, because humanity had done the impossible twice now. They had disrupted a Voidborn attack. They had tracked the Voidborn home, and if the galaxy was watching, it was about to see humanity do something no other species had dared. They were going to take the fight to the enemy. The Grand Assembly had never been so divided. Ambassador Chen Wei watched as civilizations that had stood together for thousands of years now shouted at each other across the great chamber. Some delegates had abandoned the pretense of civilized debate entirely. The Keltari flickered with agitation. The granite speakers ground their stone bodies together in distress. Even the eternal minds showed signs of computational stress in their erratic light patterns. At the center of it all stood Admiral Kwame Osi, presenting data that should have been impossible. We tracked them, he said again, his voice calm despite the chaos. The Voidborn have a home, a dimensional pocket that exists parallel to our universe. These coordinates represent the location where we can access it. Madness, declared Threshold of Knowing, their golden light pulsing with barely controlled anger. You speak of dimensional travel as if it were a simple journey. Do you have any idea how many civilizations have attempted what you propose? 12, Kwame answered immediately. 12 civilizations over the past 8,000 years have tried to breach dimensional barriers. None returned. I've read the reports, and yet you propose we do the same. I propose we do it differently. That brought a moment of silence. Chen watched Kwame carefully. He had changed over the past 2 weeks. The weight of command, of watching ships under his leadership die in the name of knowledge, had carved lines into his face. But his eyes remained steady. The previous attempts failed because they treated dimensional travel as a scientific expedition, Kwame continued. They sent their best ships, their finest minds, equipped with the most advanced technology. They approached it with confidence born of millennia of technological supremacy. And you believe your primitive vessels will succeed where they failed? A quorum representative interjected, their mathematical voice dripping with skepticism. I believe our vessels won't go in assuming we're the smartest beings in the room. The elder species failed because they expected their technology to solve every problem. Humans don't have that luxury. We're used to being outmatched. We're used to finding solutions with incomplete information and inadequate resources. Elder Stone that dreams rumbled forward, his massive form making the floor crack. Admiral Osi, you speak with passion. But passion does not protect against dimensional collapse. The reports from the failed expeditions are clear. The barriers between dimensions are not meant to be crossed. Those who tried were torn apart by forces we barely understand. Ships were compressed to singularities. Crews were spread across infinite space. Some vessels simply ceased to exist, erased from every timeline simultaneously. I know, Kwame said quietly. I've read those reports too. Every single one. Do you know what they all have in common? Failure. Hesitation. Every expedition sent probes first. Ran thousands of simulations. Approached the dimensional barrier slowly, cautiously, scientifically. And every time the barrier adapted to what they were trying to do, it's almost like, he paused, choosing his words carefully, like the barrier itself is intelligent, or at least reactive. Dr. Tanaka stepped forward. She had been silent until now, letting Kwame handle the politics. But this was her area of expertise. The dimensional barriers are not walls. They're more like membranes. They react to stress, to probing, to attempts at penetration. The more carefully you examine them, the more they reinforce themselves against you. It's a quantum observation problem at a cosmic scale. Then how do you propose to cross? Asked a representative of the Spiral Collective, their swarm body buzzing with curiosity rather than hostility. We don't cross carefully, Tanaka said. We punch through fast and hard before the barrier can react. Like breaking through thin ice. If you walk slowly, you fall through. If you run fast enough, you make it across. The chamber erupted again. This time the shouts were not just of disagreement, but of horror at the recklessness being proposed. You would gamble everything on a metaphor? Threshold of Knowing's light flared bright enough to hurt human eyes. You would risk ships and lives on a theory that dimensional barriers behave like frozen water? It's not just a metaphor, Tanaka insisted. I've been studying the data from the failed expeditions. Every single one showed the same pattern. The longer they stayed near the barrier, the more unstable it became. But the Voidborn cross in seconds. They don't hesitate. They don't probe. They just go. Because they evolved to travel that way, a quorum representative argued. They are dimensional beings. We are not. What is natural for them would be death for us. Maybe, Tanaka admitted. But we'll never know unless we try. Chen had been listening carefully to both sides. Now she stood and requested recognition. The chamber's central intelligence acknowledged her and the debates quieted. We are having the wrong argument, she said clearly. We are debating whether this mission is possible. But the real question is whether we have any choice. Explain. Elder Stone That Dreams rumbled. The Voidborn have erased 43% of known space. The rate of loss is accelerating. At current projections, they will reach Earth in 7 months. They will reach the Kelthari core worlds in 9 months. They will reach every civilization in this chamber within 2 years. She let that sink in. We are already facing extinction. The only question is whether we face it passively or actively. You speak of false choices, Threshold of Knowing said, but their voice had lost some of its certainty. We could evacuate, retreat to other galaxies, rebuild. And how long before the Voidborn follow? How long before they tear through the barriers between galaxies as easily as they tear through space? You said it yourself, they don't conquer, they erase. There is no negotiating with them. There is no surrender. There is only survival or extinction. The chamber fell silent. Chen saw it in their eyes, their sensors, their consciousness fields, the recognition of truth. They had been avoiding this conclusion for months, perhaps years. They had been hoping for a miracle, for a solution that would not require risking everything. But miracles did not come to those who waited. A new voice spoke up. It came from the back of the chamber, from a section Chen had not noticed before. The voice was young as the elder species measured such things. It belonged to Commander Vex of the Kelthari, a being who had only achieved consciousness 2 centuries ago. I volunteer, Vex said. For the dimensional expedition, I volunteer my ship and my crew. Threshold of Knowing turned their light toward the young commander. Vex, you do not understand what you are offering. I understand perfectly, Threshold. I understand that the elder generation has tried everything within their experience and failed. I understand that the humans, barely a century into space travel, have accomplished what we could not. They disrupted a Voidborn attack. They tracked the enemy home. Perhaps it is time we learned from them instead of lecturing them. Other voices began to join Vex. Young commanders from various species, officers who had come of age during the Voidborn War and knew nothing but retreat and loss. They saw in humanity's reckless courage something their own civilizations had lost, the willingness to try the impossible. This is madness, an older quorum representative protested. You would follow these children into oblivion? Better than sitting here waiting for oblivion to come to us, Commander Vex replied. The humans have a saying, fortune favors the bold. Perhaps it is time we remembered what boldness looks like. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than Chen had expected. The elder leadership largely opposed the mission. They saw it as wasteful, suicidal, a desperate gamble that would cost lives without achieving anything. But the younger generation, across species lines, voted overwhelmingly in favor. They had grown up with the Voidborn threat. They had seen worlds die, civilizations erased, and all the ancient wisdom of the galaxy failed to stop it. They were ready to try something new. The final tally was narrow but decisive. The Dimensional Expeditionary Force was approved. 50 human ships would form the core. 30 volunteer vessels from other species would join them. It was a tiny force compared to the thousands of ships in the regular fleet. But everyone understood what it represented, the galaxy's last desperate attempt to strike back. As the chamber cleared, Chen found herself surrounded by young alien officers eager to coordinate with the human fleet. They asked questions about tactics, about human psychology, about how a species so young could be so brave. Chen answered as best she could, but she knew the truth. Humans were not uniquely brave. They were uniquely inexperienced. They did not know enough to understand how impossible their task was. Maybe that was an advantage. Kwame found her hours later, after the last of the volunteers had left. He looked exhausted. "We got our mission," he said without preamble. "Now we have to figure out how to actually do it. The technology is being provided by the Keltari remnant. Threshold of Knowing may hate this plan, but they're not sabotaging it. They're giving us access to ancient dimensional gateway technology. Theoretical stuff mostly. None of it has been tested, of course not. Everyone who tested it died." Kwame laughed, a harsh sound. "Dr. Tanaka is already working with their scientists. She thinks she can modify the gateway to work with our quantum disruption fields. It's all theoretical. We're building a ship designed to survive something no one has ever survived." Chen looked out at the stars visible through the chamber's transparent walls. "How long do we have?" 3 weeks to prepare. The Voidborn are pushing hard. We think they know something is happening. They're attacking more aggressively. If we wait too long, there might not be a fleet left to launch. And the crews? You're asking people to volunteer for what everyone agrees is a suicide mission? I'm not asking anyone. I wouldn't go with myself. I'll be commanding the expedition personally. Chen had expected this, but it still hit hard. Kwame was one of the few human officers who understood both human and alien military doctrine. Losing him would hurt humanity's war effort, but she also understood why he had to go. Some missions required the presence of true believers. Over the next 3 weeks, the Dimensional Expeditionary Force took shape. The human ships were refitted with experimental quantum stabilizers, technology cobbled together from human engineering and Kelthari theory. The volunteer alien vessels were similarly modified. Everything was untested. Everything was theoretical. They were literally building their survival equipment based on educated guesses about how dimensional physics worked. The crews trained for scenarios no one could accurately predict. How do you prepare to enter a space where the laws of physics might be different? Dr. Tanaka ran them through simulations, but she was honest about the limitations. "These simulations are guesses," she told them bluntly. "The Voidborn dimension might be nothing like what I'm showing you. Or it might be worse. The only thing I can promise is that reality will not work the way you're used to." On the final night before launch, the crews were given time to record messages for their families. Some wrote long letters. Some recorded videos. Some simply stared at communication screens, unable to find words for what might be their final goodbye. This was not a normal military deployment. This was a one-way trip into the unknown with no expectation of return. Lieutenant Maria Santos, now commanding her own ship in the expedition, recorded a message for her daughter. "I'm sorry I won't be there to watch you grow up," she said to the camera. "But I hope you understand why I have to do this. The Voidborn would reach Earth eventually. Better that we face them now, on our terms, than wait for them to bring the fight to you." She deleted the recording and started over 4 times before she was satisfied. Even then, she knew the words were inadequate. The launch ceremony was brief. The Galactic Council assembled to witness the departure, but there were no grand speeches, no triumphant music. Everyone knew what this mission represented. These ships were not expected to return. These crews were not expected to survive. This was not a strategic deployment. This was a sacrifice. Ambassador Chen stood on the observation deck of the Great Assembly, watching the 80 ships form up in space. They looked so small against the backdrop of stars, so fragile. 50 human vessels, barely larger than the shuttles the elder species used for planetary transport. 30 alien volunteers, ships from a dozen civilizations who had put aside millennia of technological pride to follow humanity's lead. Commander Vex's ship was among them, a Kelthari energy vessel that pulsed with golden light. The young commander had fought against their elders' wishes to join this mission. Now they sailed alongside humans who their species had dismissed as primitive just weeks ago. "Do you think they'll succeed?" asked Elder Stone That Dreams, who had joined Chen on the observation deck. "I think they'll try," Chen answered. "And sometimes trying is enough. The humans have changed us," the ancient being rumbled thoughtfully. Not through superior technology or ancient wisdom, but through the simple act of refusing to accept defeat. They have reminded us what it means to fight. Let's hope that's enough. The fleet activated their dimensional gateways. Space itself began to tear around them. Not the violent ripping of a void-born portal, but a careful, controlled opening. Tanaka's modifications were working. The barriers between dimensions began to thin, and then, in a flash of light that seemed to exist in colors that should not be possible, the Dimensional Expeditionary Force vanished from normal space. The observation deck was silent. Every delegate, every consciousness, every being present understood the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. A tiny fleet of barely 80 ships had just done what 12 previous civilizations had failed to do. They had crossed into the Voidborn's dimension. Will we ever see them again? Someone asked. No one had an answer. In the depths of dimensional space, beyond the barriers of reality, the 80 ships emerged into nightmare. This was not space as they knew it. This was something else, something wrong, but they were through. They had crossed the barrier. And now, for the first time in 30 years of war, the galaxy had brought the fight to the Voidborn's doorstep. What happened next would determine the fate of every living thing in the universe. The expedition had crossed into the unknown. There was no turning back. There was only forward, and somewhere in the twisted dimensions ahead the Voidborn waited, about to learn what it meant to be hunted. The first thing Admiral Kwame Ose noticed when they crossed the dimensional barrier was the silence. Space was never truly silent, of course. There were radiation frequencies, particle movements, the background hum of existence itself. But here, in the Voidborn dimension, all of that was gone. It was not just an absence of sound. It was an absence of everything familiar. Then the screaming started. Systems failing across all decks, Commander Jackson reported, his voice tight with barely controlled panic, gravity fluctuating. Hull integrity compromised on decks 7 through 9. Sir, the ship is coming apart. Around them, 5 human vessels simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed in explosions or torn apart by forces. They just stopped being there, as if reality had decided they never existed in the first place. Kwame watched crew members he had served with for years vanish along with their ships. Erased so completely that he found himself struggling to remember their names. All ships, emergency stabilization, Kwame ordered. Activate quantum anchors now! The quantum anchors were Dr. Tanaka's invention. Theoretical devices that were supposed to lock their ships to the physical laws they knew. They had never been tested because testing them required being in another dimension. Now they would find out if they worked. The stabilization was not instant. For several seconds that felt like hours. The endurance phased between existence and non-existence. Kwame could see through his own hands. The bridge crew flickered like bad holographic projections. The ship's hull became transparent, then solid, then transparent again. Then, with a sound like reality snapping back into place, they stabilized. The quantum anchors worked, barely. The ship was solid again. The crew stopped flickering. But 5 ships were gone, and everyone knew they had barely survived the first seconds. Damage report, Kwame demanded. 23% of the fleet lost in transition, Jackson said grimly. All remaining ships are damaged but stable. The alien volunteers, he paused, checking his screens. They're in worse shape. Their technology wasn't designed for this. 3 Kelthari vessels are barely holding together. The Granite speaker ship has lost all mobility. They're alive but stranded? And the Voidborn? No sign yet. But Admiral, you need to see this. Jackson brought up the main view screen and Kwame felt his breath catch. They had emerged into what could only be described as a dying universe. The sky, if it could be called that, was a sickly purple that hurt to look at. Stars existed here, but they were wrong. They pulsed with irregular rhythms as if they were in pain. Some were being pulled apart by forces that should not exist. Their matter streaming toward massive dark rifts that hung in space like wounds. And everywhere, there were ships. Not Voidborn attackers, but derelicts. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. Ships from civilizations Kwame recognized and many he did not. The previous 12 expeditions that had tried to cross the dimensional barrier. They had not been destroyed. They had made it through. They had just never made it back. My God, Commander Jackson whispered. They all made it this far. And died here, Kwame finished grimly. Dr. Tanaka, please tell me you're seeing this. In her laboratory, Tanaka was surrounded by displays that showed impossible physics. Space here did not follow the rules. Time flowed in multiple directions simultaneously. Gravity pointed in ways that made no sense, and energy, the very substance of reality, was being slowly drained away by something massive at the center of this pocket dimension. "Admiral," she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and excitement, "I'm detecting a massive energy drain. Everything in this dimension is being pulled toward a central point. It's like," she struggled for words, "like this entire pocket universe is collapsing inward, slowly but inevitably. Can we survive here? For a while? Maybe days, maybe hours. The quantum anchors are holding us to our physical laws, but the drain is constant. We're fighting against the nature of this space itself. Eventually we'll lose. Then we'd better work fast. Find the Voidborn. Find out what's here." The fleet moved deeper into the dimension, carefully avoiding the derelict ships and the rifts that seemed to devour everything. The alien volunteers stayed close to the human vessels. Commander Vex's ship had taken significant damage in the crossing, but the young Kelthari refused to turn back. "We came this far," Vex transmitted. "We will see it through." They found the first Voidborn settlement 3 hours later. It was not what anyone expected. The elder species had always assumed the Voidborn were some kind of hostile intelligence, perhaps even machines. But what the expedition found was a city, a massive, sprawling structure built around one of the dying stars. And it was filled with life. Millions of Voidborn. Billions, perhaps. They moved through structures that looked organic, as if the city itself was alive and growing. But everything about the settlement spoke of desperation. The buildings were built on top of each other with no planning, no order. The Voidborn moved in frantic patterns, as if constantly searching for something. "They're refugees," Lieutenant Santos said from her ship, the recognition clear in her voice. "This isn't an invasion force's home. This is a refugee camp." Dr. Tanaka's scans confirmed it. "The dimension is collapsing. Has been for centuries, maybe longer. The Voidborn are harvesting energy from our universe because theirs is dying. Every time they create a rift, they pull matter and energy through to sustain themselves." "So the worlds they've been erasing," Commander Jackson said slowly. "They're not destroying them. They're converting them to energy," Tanaka finished, "pulling them into this dimension and consuming them to stave off the collapse. They're not conquerors, Admiral. They're survivors doing whatever it takes to live." The realization hit the crew hard. For 30 years, the galaxy had fought what they thought was an alien invasion. But it was not an invasion. It was a desperate attempt at survival by a species facing extinction. The Voidborn had not attacked out of malice. They had attacked because they were dying. "Does it matter?" Santos asked harshly. "They're still killing us. Intent doesn't change the body count." She was right, and Kwame knew it. Understanding the enemy's motivation did not make their victims any less dead. But it changed the equation. An invasion could be defeated by destroying the invaders. But refugees fighting for survival would fight until there was nothing left to fight with. "We need to find their command structure," Kwame decided. "Their leaders. Someone we can talk to." "Talk to?" Jackson sounded incredulous. "Sir, they've erased 4,000 worlds. What makes you think they'll talk?" "Because we're here. Because we did what no one else has done. We came to them. That has to mean something." The fleet pressed deeper into Voidborn space, past settlements and energy collection facilities. They saw the infrastructure of a civilization on the brink. Everything was focused on survival, on extracting every possible unit of energy from their dying dimension and from the raids they conducted into normal space. They also saw the cost. Dead Voidborn floated everywhere, not killed in battle but simply expired. Their dimensional forms had dissipated, unable to maintain cohesion in the collapsing space. The Voidborn were not just killing other species. They were dying themselves. The fleet encountered resistance eventually. Voidborn ships, if they could be called ships, moved to intercept. But these were not the terrifying attackers that had ravaged the galaxy. These were defenders, and they looked scared. "Sir, they're not attacking," Jackson observed. "They're surrounding us, but they're not firing." Because we're in their home, Kwame realized. In our space, they're invincible. Here, they're vulnerable. They don't know what we'll do. "Admiral," Santos transmitted urgently, "I'm picking up a massive energy signature ahead. It's orders of magnitude larger than anything else we've detected." "The Queen Nexus," Tanaka breathed. "That has to be it. The central intelligence that maintains the dimensional rifts. It's how they coordinate their attacks across such vast distances. Without it, they can't access our universe." The fleet approached the energy signature carefully. What they found was beyond comprehension. It was a structure that existed partially in multiple dimensions at once. A massive organic-looking construction that seemed to shift and change even as they watched. Energy flowed through it in patterns that made Dr. Tanaka weep with frustration because she could not fully understand them. And within it, something aware. Something intelligent. Something that had been watching them since they arrived. The communication came not in words but in images, feelings, concepts transmitted directly into their minds. It was uncomfortable, alien, but comprehensible. The Queen Nexus was speaking to them. The message was simple. Why have you come? Kwame found himself speaking aloud, knowing somehow that the entity could understand him. To find you. To understand why you're attacking us. To stop the war. More images flooded his mind. The void-born dimension, vibrant and alive millennia ago. Then the slow collapse, the realization that their universe was dying. The desperate search for solutions. The discovery of rifts leading to other dimensions, to universes still alive and full of energy. The terrible choice between extinction and survival through the destruction of others. We did not choose this war, the Queen Nexus communicated. We chose life. Your species would do the same. Maybe, Kwame admitted. But there has to be another way. You're killing us to survive, but you're dying anyway. Look at your dimension. How long do you think you can hold it together? A century, too? Eventually you'll run out of universes to raid. We know, came the response, heavy with sorrow. We have always known, but we are not ready to die. Neither are we. The standoff lasted for hours. The fleet held position, weapons ready but not firing. The void-born defenders surrounded them, also waiting. And at the center, the Queen Nexus considered the first enemy that had ever come to talk rather than fight. It was Dr. Tanaka, who finally broke the impasse. She had been studying the energy flows, the dimensional structure, the physics of this dying universe. And she had seen something the Voidborn, for all their desperate intelligence, had missed. Admiral, she transmitted, I think I have a solution, but it's going to sound insane. Everything about this mission is insane, Doctor. What do you have? We can't save their dimension. It's too far gone. But we might be able to create a new one. A pocket dimension, small but stable, big enough for the Voidborn to survive without raiding other universes. Kwame felt his heart race. Is that even possible? The Kelthari have dimensional gateway technology. We've been using it to cross barriers, but theoretically the same technology could create barriers, carve out a small piece of dimensional space and stabilize it. It would require enormous energy, but... She hesitated. The Queen Nexus is already generating that level of energy to maintain the rifts. If we could redirect it, use it to create instead of to connect, we could give them a new home, a smaller one. They'd have to reduce their population, live more efficiently. But it would be stable. It wouldn't collapse. They wouldn't need to raid other universes to survive. Kwame transmitted the concept to the Queen Nexus, letting Tanaka's data flow through their connection. For a long moment there was silence. Then images flooded back. Not of rejection, but of desperate hope. This is possible. The Queen Nexus's question was urgent. You can create such a space? We think so. But we need your help. Your energy generation, our gateway technology combined. It's never been tried. It might fail. It might kill everyone here. Better a chance at life than slow extinction, came the response. But not all the Voidborn agreed. The fleet's sensors detected massive energy surges from multiple directions. Voidborn ships, hundreds of them, were converging on their position. These were not defenders. These were extremists who preferred death in battle to peace with those they saw as prey. All ships, defensive formation, Kwame ordered. Dr. Tanaka, how long do you need? To build a new dimension from scratch? Days, weeks, I don't know. You have hours, maybe less. The battle that followed was unlike anything in the fleet's experience. The Voidborn extremists attacked with suicidal fury, throwing themselves at the human and alien ships. But here in the Voidborn dimension, the rules were different. The attackers were not invincible. Human weapons designed to disrupt dimensional stability actually worked here. Lieutenant Santos led her ship in a desperate defense of the Queen Nexus. Her vessel had been damaged in the crossing and was barely functional, but she fought with everything she had. When her weapons failed, she used her ship itself as a battering ram, slamming into Voidborn attackers to drive them back. Commander Vex's Kelthari ship, wounded but not defeated, channeled pure energy into defensive barriers that protected the human vessels. Other alien volunteers, species that had never fought together before, coordinated their attacks with practiced precision. And at the center of it all, Dr. Tanaka worked. She pulled engineers from every ship in the fleet, human and alien alike. Together they began to construct the impossible, a new dimension. They combined Keltari gateway technology with human quantum mechanics, threw in principles from a dozen other species, and held it all together with hope and desperation. The Queen Nexus provided the energy, redirecting the massive flows that had been maintaining thousands of rifts into normal space. As those rifts closed, the Voidborn's ability to raid the galaxy ended. But it also meant there was no turning back. If this failed, the Voidborn would be trapped in their collapsing dimension with no way to gather the energy they needed to survive. Hours passed. The battle raged. Ships died on both sides. Santos's vessel finally gave out, engines dead, systems failing. She and her crew evacuated just before it was torn apart by Voidborn weapons. They were picked up by a granite speaker ship, rescued by a species they had only met weeks before. And then, just as the fleet was about to be overwhelmed, something happened. Reality bent, not broke, but folded in on itself in a way that should not be possible. Dr. Tanaka's creation activated. A new pocket dimension came into existence. It was small, barely large enough for a few solar systems, but it was stable. The collapse that had been consuming the Voidborn's universe did not exist there. Energy flowed in sustainable patterns. The laws of physics, while different from normal space, were consistent and survivable. It was not the vast empire the Voidborn had once possessed. But it was home. It was life. It was enough. The Queen Nexus's presence filled every mind in the fleet. Not words, but pure emotion. Gratitude, wonder, hope. Things the Voidborn had not felt in centuries. "You have given us life," the entity communicated. "We will not forget." The Voidborn began to migrate, millions of them flowing into the new dimension. They left behind their dying universe, their desperate settlements, their war machines. Some of the extremists refused to go, choosing to die fighting rather than accept peace. But most saw the gift for what it was, a second chance. As the last Voidborn crossed into their new home, the Queen Nexus spoke one final time to Admiral Kwame Osei. "Tell your people," it said. "Tell your galaxy. The Voidborn will raid no more. The war is over. And it ended not because you destroyed us, but because you showed us another way." The dimensional gateway back to normal space opened. It was different from the violent rifts the Voidborn had created. This was controlled, gentle, a proper bridge between dimensions. The fleet, battered and depleted, began the journey home. They had lost 60% of their ships. 48 vessels would never see home again. But the crews who remained carried with them something that had been missing from the galaxy for 30 years. Hope. The war was over. Not through superior firepower or ancient wisdom, but through the simple act of seeing the enemy as something other than a monster. Through the courage to offer mercy instead of vengeance. As the fleet crossed back into normal space, they did not know what reception awaited them. They did not know if the galaxy would celebrate their victory or condemn their choice to spare the enemy. They only knew that they had done something impossible. They had entered the Voidborn's dimension, fought them on their home ground, and won not by destroying them, but by saving them. And in that moment, humanity proved something that would echo through galactic history. The greatest weapon was not the strongest gun or the smartest strategy. It was the willingness to see the person behind the monster and to offer them a hand instead of a fist. The fleet emerged into normal space, battered but alive. And the galaxy watched in stunned silence as the ships that were never supposed to return came home, carrying news that would change everything. The Voidborn were gone. Not destroyed, saved, and the universe would never be the same. The Great Assembly was silent when the dimensional gateway opened. Every delegate, every consciousness, every being present had gathered to witness what they assumed would be a memorial service. The Dimensional Expeditionary Force had been gone for 17 days. 17 days without contact, without any sign they still existed. The galaxy had accepted what seemed inevitable. The fleet was lost. Another failed expedition to add to the list of 12 before it. Then space tore open, and ships began to emerge. Not 80 ships. 32. Battered, damaged, some barely holding together. But alive. Against all probability, against all expectation, they had returned. Ambassador Chen Wei stood on the observation deck, tears streaming down her face. She watched as the UHSS Endurance, Admiral Kwame Osi's flagship, limped through the gateway. Its hull was scarred with damage that should have been fatal. Entire sections were exposed to vacuum. But it was flying, and Kwame was alive. The assembly erupted into chaos, but this time it was not anger or fear. It was shock, disbelief, and slowly, cautiously hope. Impossible, Threshold of Knowing whispered, their golden light flickering with emotions they had thought lost. They survived. The humans survived. Not just survived, Elderstone That Dreams rumbled, his ancient voice filled with wonder. Look at the gateway. It's stable, controlled. This is not a desperate escape. This is a planned return. Kwame's transmission came through on all channels. His voice was tired, worn down by weeks of impossible stress, but it was steady. Grand Assembly, this is Admiral Kwame Ose of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. I am pleased to report that our mission was a success. The Voidborn threat has been neutralized. The chamber went silent again, but it was a different silence now. It was the silence of a galaxy holding its breath. Neutralized? A quorum representative finally asked. Admiral, are you claiming you destroyed the Voidborn? No, Kwame replied. We saved them. For the next 6 hours, the returning crews told their story. They spoke of the dying dimension, the desperate refugee civilization, the Queen Nexus that had coordinated the attacks. They explained Dr. Tanaka's solution, the creation of a new pocket dimension. They showed data, recordings, evidence of what they had found and what they had done. Some delegates reacted with anger. How dare humanity spare an enemy that had killed trillions? How dare they offer mercy to monsters who had erased worlds? But as the story unfolded, as the full picture became clear, even the angriest voices fell silent. They were dying, Commander Vex explained to the assembly. The young Keltari's light was dim from exhaustion, but they spoke with conviction. We went expecting to find evil. We found desperation. They raided our universe because theirs was collapsing. They killed because the alternative was their own extinction. And what happens when their new dimension runs out of energy? Demanded one of the elder Kelthari. What happens when they need more resources? Will they not simply begin raiding again? Dr. Tanaka stepped forward. She had barely slept since returning, too busy compiling data and analyzing what they had learned. The new dimension is stable, self-sustaining. The energy flows are balanced. The Voidborn will not need to raid other universes. They will have to live more efficiently, maintain a smaller population, but they will survive. You are asking us to trust them, Threshold of Knowing said quietly, to trust beings who have caused so much death. I'm asking you to trust that survival instinct cuts both ways, Kwame replied. They attacked because they were desperate. Now they're not desperate anymore. The calculus has changed. War no longer benefits them. And if you're wrong, if they attack again, then we'll know how to reach their dimension. We've proven it can be done. The threat of retaliation is real now, but I don't think we'll need it. You didn't see what I saw. The Voidborn were dying slowly but certainly. We offered them life. That means something. Lieutenant Maria Santos, her uniform still scorched from the battle she had fought, stood to speak. I lost friends in that dimension. Good people who died fighting Voidborn extremists. And I'll carry that for the rest of my life. But I also saw Voidborn refugees, millions of them, just trying to survive. I saw their children, if you can call them that. I saw a civilization at the end of its rope, doing terrible things because they had no other choice. She paused, choosing her words carefully. We've all done terrible things when we thought survival depended on it. Every species in this chamber has a history of violence when threatened. The Voidborn are no different. They're just better at it. Elderstone That Dreams moved forward, his massive stone body grinding against the chamber floor. The human speaks truth. Our species, the Granite Speakers, once destroyed an entire star system to prevent a plague from spreading. We killed billions to save trillions. At the time, we saw no alternative. In retrospect, perhaps there were options we did not consider because we were too focused on survival. Other delegates began to speak, sharing similar stories. The Kelthari had once wiped out a sentient fungal species because they competed for the same resources. The quorum had erased 3 artificial intelligent civilizations they deemed threats to order. Every elder species had blood on their hands, decisions made in desperation that they regretted in hindsight. We are not innocent. Threshold of knowing admitted, their light dimming with shame. We judge the Voidborn as monsters, but we have all been monsters when survival demanded it.
Perhaps that is why we could not defeat them.
We were fighting our own reflection. The debate continued for days. The galaxy grappled with a question it had never seriously considered. What did you do with an enemy who was no longer a threat? The instinct was to demand punishment, to see justice for the 4,000 worlds that had been destroyed. But punishment served the living, not the dead, and the living needed to decide what kind of galaxy they wanted to build. Chen found Kwame 3 days after the return, standing on an observation deck looking out at Earth. The blue planet hung in space, safe for the first time in months. The voidborn rifts that had been slowly spreading toward human space had closed. The threat was over. How do you feel? She asked him. Exhausted, guilty, relieved, all at once. He did not look at her, kept his eyes on Earth. I made a choice in that dimension, Chen. I chose to save an enemy instead of destroying them. 48 crews died because of that choice. If we had just attacked, maybe more would have survived. Or maybe everyone would have died, Chen countered. The Voidborn were desperate. Desperate enemies fight to the last. You gave them a reason to stop fighting. That saved lives. I keep thinking about all the people who died before we figured it out. 4,000 worlds. Trillions of beings. What do I say to them? Sorry, we fixed it, but too late for you? You say that their deaths mattered. That we learned from them. That we'll do better next time. Chen moved to stand beside him. Kwame, you did something no one in galactic history has done. You won a war without firing the killing shot. That's going to echo for centuries. Or it's going to make humanity look soft, weak, willing to spare monsters. No, Chen said firmly. It's going to make humanity look wise, strong enough to choose mercy over vengeance. Every other species in this galaxy has fought wars of extermination. You fought a war of salvation. There's a difference. The Galactic Council's final decision came after a week of deliberation. The Dimensional Expeditionary Force was formally recognized and honored. The human fleet was awarded the Star of Valor, the highest military honor in galactic history, previously only given twice in 8,000 years. Commander Vex and the alien volunteers received the same recognition, but more importantly, the Council established new protocols. If any species faced extinction-level threats in the future, they were to seek help from the galactic community before resorting to desperate measures. And a permanent monitoring station was established near the Voidborn's new dimension, not as a threat, but as a connection point, because something unexpected had happened in those 17 days. Humanity and the Voidborn had begun to understand each other, not as enemies but as species who had both done terrible things in the name of survival, and understanding, it turned out, was the first step towards something else entirely. 6 months after the expedition returned, the first cultural exchange program began. A small group of scientists, human and alien, entered the Voidborn dimension through the stable gateway. They were greeted not with hostility but with curiosity. The Voidborn wanted to learn about the species that had saved them, and the galaxy's species wanted to understand the beings who had terrified them for 30 years. What they found was surprising. The Voidborn were not simple creatures of instinct. They had art, philosophy, history. They had loved their dying dimension and mourned its loss. They had hated what they felt forced to do to survive. The raids had broken them as much as they had broken their victims. Dr. Tanaka spent 3 months in the Voidborn dimension, working with their scientists to ensure the new space remained stable. She returned with knowledge that revolutionized galactic understanding of dimensional physics. The Voidborn, it turned out, knew things about the universe that the elder species had never discovered. They're not primitive, Tanaka reported to the Council. They're different. They see reality from a perspective we can barely imagine, and they're willing to share what they know, in gratitude for what we did. The technology exchange that followed changed the galaxy. The Voidborn taught the principles of dimensional stability. The galactic species shared resources to help the Voidborn rebuild their civilization in their new home. It was not always smooth. There were tensions, resentments, moments when old hatreds threatened to reignite. But both sides remembered the alternative. The Voidborn remembered what it felt like to watch their universe die with no hope of survival. The galactic species remembered 30 years of helplessness against an enemy they could not defeat. Neither side wanted to return to that. Lieutenant Santos, promoted to captain after the expedition, was assigned to the monitoring station. She watched ships pass between dimensions, carrying goods, knowledge, and slowly, carefully trust. She thought about her daughter back on Earth, growing up in a galaxy that was learning to solve problems with conversation instead of weapons. "Do you think it'll last?" her second officer asked one day, watching a void-born vessel dock with the station to deliver dimensional technology. "I don't know," Santos admitted, "but I think we have a chance." Both sides paid too high a price to throw it away casually. Admiral Kwame Osei retired from military service 1 year after the expedition. He had become too famous, too symbolic. Every decision he made was analyzed by a galaxy looking for leadership. He retreated to a quiet life, teaching at a military academy where he tried to pass on what he had learned. On his final day of active duty, Ambassador Chen came to see him. She had been promoted too, now serving as humanity's primary representative to the Galactic Council. Earth's voice had grown from a whisper to a roar in just 1 year. "The Council wants to offer you a position," she told him. "Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense Forces. It's mostly ceremonial, but you'd be the first human to hold such a rank." Kwame shook his head. "I'm done being a symbol. Let someone else carry that weight." "Then what will you do?" "Teach right, maybe try to figure out what we did right so we can do it again if we need to." He smiled. "We got lucky, Chen, incredibly lucky. We went into that dimension expecting to fight, and we found an enemy we could negotiate with. Next time we might not be so fortunate." "Then we'll have to make our own luck," Chen replied. "The way we always have." Kwame looked out at the stars one last time from his office. Somewhere out there in a pocket dimension held together by hope and mathematics, the Voidborn were building a new civilization. They would never reclaim their former glory. Their population had been reduced by half in the transition to the new dimension. They lived in a space barely large enough for a few solar systems, but they lived, and that mattered. The galaxy had learned something profound in those 17 days. The strongest military force in known history had failed to defeat the Voidborn. But a tiny expedition of barely 80 ships had succeeded, not by being stronger but by being smarter. By seeing beyond the immediate conflict to the root cause, humanity had not made the Voidborn vanish through superior firepower. They had not erased the enemy from existence. They had done something far more difficult and far more important. They had shown the enemy another path. They had proven that survival did not require the destruction of others. And in doing so, they had changed the galaxy's understanding of what strength meant. Power was not just the ability to destroy, it was also the courage to create, to build, to offer mercy when vengeance would be easier. 5 years after the expedition, the first Voidborn embassy opened on Earth. It was a controversial decision. Many humans still remembered the terror of watching the enemy advance across the galaxy, knowing Earth would eventually be in their path. But the embassy stood as a symbol of what had been achieved. The ambassador was a Voidborn named Convergence of Paths, who had been part of the Queen Nexus's council. They spoke through a translation device, their voice like wind through canyons. "We come in peace," they said at the opening ceremony, "not because we have become peaceful, but because we no longer need to be violent. Your species gave us that gift. We will not forget." Ambassador Chen, now elderly and gray, stood beside them. "We didn't do it alone," she reminded the assembled crowd. "Humans provided the courage. The Kelthari provided the technology. The Granite Speakers provided the wisdom. It took all of us working together to achieve what none of us could do alone. That became humanity's legacy, not as the species that defeated the Voidborn, but as the species that brought the galaxy together to save them. Not as warriors, though they had proven their courage in battle, but as bridge builders seeing connections where others saw only divisions. The story of the Dimensional Expeditionary Force became legend. Children across the galaxy learned about the tiny fleet that did the impossible, about Admiral Kwame Osei who chose salvation over destruction, about Dr. Yuki Tanaka who built a dimension from theory and desperation, about Commander Vex and the young aliens who followed humanity's lead, about Lieutenant Maria Santos who fought not for victory, but for the chance to offer peace, and about Ambassador Chen Wei, who had started it all by standing in a council chamber and asking a simple question: what could humans possibly offer? The answer, it turned out, was everything. Not superior technology or ancient wisdom, but fresh eyes to see old problems in new ways, the courage to try the impossible, and most importantly, the empathy to see the being behind the monster and offer them a hand instead of a fist. The galaxy had watched humanity enter the war zone expecting to see them die. Instead, they watched something far more remarkable. They watched humans do what everyone said was impossible. They watched the Voidborn vanish, not destroyed but saved, relocated beyond all conventional dimensions to a new home built from hope and mathematics. And the galaxy learned that the young species from Earth, barely a century into space travel, had something to teach civilizations that had existed for millennia. Sometimes the greatest victory was not defeating your enemy. It was showing them they did not need to be your enemy at all. The war had ended. The Voidborn were gone from the normal universe, and in their place was something the galaxy had not seen in 30 years. A future worth believing in. Humanity had entered the war zone. The foe had vanished beyond all dimensions, but it was not through destruction. It was through the radical act of compassion, and that made all the difference. The story did not end there, of course. There would be new challenges, new threats, new conflicts, but the galaxy faced them with a new tool in their arsenal. The knowledge that even the most terrifying enemy might just be a desperate friend in disguise. And sometimes the bravest thing you could do was put down your weapon and offer your hand. That was humanity's gift to the stars. Not violence, though they could fight when needed, but the radical belief that there was always another way, if you were brave enough to look for it. And sometimes, just sometimes, that belief was enough to change everything.
The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a soft hiss. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through them, her black diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the colorful robes and natural coverings of the other species around her. The chamber was huge, built to hold representatives from dozens of different worlds. Crystal formations jutted from the walls, glowing with soft blue light that worked for most species' vision. Elena took her seat in the human section. It was still new, still small. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Council 15 years ago. Before that, Earth was just another world on the edge of known space, a primitive planet where the locals had barely figured out how to travel between stars. The Saurian delegate, Kreshmar, stood at the center podium. His reptilian scales shifted from green to dark red as he spoke. This meant he was angry or scared. Elena had learned to read the basic emotions of the major species during her training. "The situation grows worse each day," Kreshmar said, his voice carrying through the chamber's translation system. "The Catherian Empire has taken another 3 systems. Our combined fleets cannot stop them. They move through our defenses like we are not even there." Murmurs filled the chamber. The crystalline Vorthak delegates made sounds like wind chimes in a storm. The gas-breathing Nethys floated in their containment suits, their tentacles writhing, with worry. Elena had seen this same meeting play out dozens of times over the past 3 years. Always the same reports. Always the same fear. Admiral Chen of the Council Defense Fleet took the podium next. He was Vorthak, his crystal body reflecting the chamber's light in rainbow patterns. When he spoke, his voice sounded like music, but the words were grim. "We have lost 47 major warships this month alone," Admiral Chen said. "The Catherians' biomechanical technology adapts to our weapons too quickly. Their psychic warriors can take control of our crew's minds. We estimate their forces now control over 60 inhabited systems." Elena listened to the numbers. Billions of people dead or enslaved. Entire civilizations wiped out or absorbed into the Catherian Empire. The war had been going on for 3 standard years now, and the Council forces were losing badly. The Catherians were an old race. They had been building their empire for thousands of years before humans even learned to make fire. Their ships were alive, grown rather than built. The hulls could heal damage in minutes. The weapons learned from each battle and became stronger. Worst of all, their crews could reach into the minds of enemy soldiers and turn them into allies. "What about the new defense platforms around Nexus Prime?" asked Senator Thilla of the Etherian Republic. Her people looked almost human, except for their silver skin and completely black eyes. "Surely they can hold the line if the Catherians reach this far." Admiral Chen's crystal body dimmed, which meant sadness or despair. The platforms were designed to fight conventional enemies. The Catherian bioships simply ignore most of our defensive systems. They phase through energy shields and absorb kinetic impacts. More worried sounds filled the chamber. Elena had been to many of these meetings, but today felt different. Today felt desperate. Counselor Prime Vexna stood up. She was ancient, even by the standards of her long-lived species. The Zephyrians lived for thousands of years, and Vexna had been leading the council for over 8 centuries. Her 6 arms gestured gracefully as she spoke. "We must face the truth," Vexna said. "Our traditional methods of warfare are not working. The Catherians have adapted to every strategy we have tried. Perhaps it is time to consider other options." Elena felt dozens of alien eyes turn toward the human section. She knew what was coming. It happened every time the council got desperate. Enough. They would ask the newest members to contribute something. Usually it was resources or industrial support. This time, Elena suspected they wanted more. "Ambassador Vasquez," Vexna said, "your species has remained neutral in this conflict. We understand that humanity is still developing its military capabilities. However, we must ask if Earth would consider joining our defense efforts." Elena stood up slowly. The chamber became quiet. Even the background hum of the life support systems seemed to fade. She looked around at the assembled delegates. Hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds, all representing civilizations that were thousands of years older than humanity, all of them afraid. "Counselor Prime," Elena said, her voice steady, "humanity has been watching this war very carefully. We have studied the Catherian tactics. We have analyzed their technology. We have learned about their history and their goals." She paused, letting her words sink in. The translation systems carried her voice to every species in their own language. "The Council asks if humanity will join your defense efforts," Elena continued. "But we think you are asking the wrong question." Confused sounds came from around the chamber. Saurian scales shifted colors. Vorthak crystals flickered. The Nethys delegates huddled closer together in their gas-filled suits. "What do you mean, Ambassador?" Vexna asked. Elena took a deep breath. What she was about to say would change everything. It would either save the galaxy or destroy humanity's place in it. "You should not be asking if humanity will join your defense," Elena said. "You should be asking if you will accept humanity's leadership in this war." The chamber erupted. Angry shouts and protests filled the air. The Saurian delegates hissed loudly. Several Etherian senators stood up and pointed at Elena. Even the normally calm Vorthak crystals flashed with bright, angry light. "This is outrageous," shouted General Kethvar of the Saurian Military Council. "Humans have barely learned to travel between stars. Your species discovered fusion power only 200 years ago." "Your largest warship has fewer weapons than our escort vessels," added Commander Schill of the Etherian Navy. "What could humanity possibly offer that our combined fleets cannot provide?" Elena waited for the noise to die down. She remained standing, calm and patient. This was exactly the reaction she had expected. These ancient civilizations could not imagine that a young species like humanity might have something they lacked. "General Kethvar is correct," Elena said when the chamber was quiet again. "Humanity's technology is primitive compared to yours. Our ships are slower, our weapons are weaker, and our defenses are basic." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from each major species. "But there is something the Council forces lack," Elena continued. "Something that no amount of advanced technology can replace. Something the Catherians have never faced before." "And what is that?" Vexna asked. Elena smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the kind of smile that would have made any human in the room very nervous. "Desperation," Elena said. "You fight this war like civilized beings. You follow rules of engagement that are thousands of years old. You worry about honor and proper conduct. You treat war like a formal dance between enemies who respect each other. The chamber was completely silent now. Every delegate was listening carefully. Humanity does not fight that way, Elena said. We come from a world where everything tries to kill us. Our weather, our animals, our diseases, even our plants are dangerous. We learned to survive by doing whatever it takes. We learned that there are no rules when your species faces extinction. You speak of barbarism, said Senator Thilla. Civilized beings do not abandon all principles in warfare. Civilized beings are losing this war, Elena replied. Your principles and your honor mean nothing to the Catherians. They enslave entire populations and turn captured worlds into breeding grounds for their bioships. They do not respect your rules of war. Elena walked to the center of the chamber, taking the main podium. Every eye in the room followed her. The Council has fought the Catherians for 3 years using traditional tactics, she said. Fleet battles in open space, honorable duels between captains, careful protection of civilian populations, measured responses to enemy actions. She paused, letting the weight of their failures settle on the assembled delegates. In those 3 years, you have lost 60 star systems. The Catherian Empire has grown stronger with each victory. They adapt to your tactics because your tactics are predictable. You fight the way civilized species have always fought. What are you suggesting? Admiral Chen asked. His crystal body was pulsing with nervous energy. I am suggesting that this war cannot be won by civilized means, Elena said. The Catherians have evolved beyond conventional warfare. They use biological weapons, mind control, and terror tactics. They turn your own people against you. They corrupt entire worlds to serve their purposes. Elena's voice grew stronger, more forceful. If you want to defeat an enemy like that, you need soldiers who understand what it means to fight without limits. You need warriors who care more about winning than about looking honorable while they lose. The chamber was so quiet that Elena could hear the breathing of species that actually needed to breathe. Humanity offers to lead this war effort, Elena said. We will coordinate all council forces under human command. We will plan the strategies and choose the tactics. We will decide which battles to fight and which sacrifices to make. And in return, Vexna asked. In return, you must accept that we will not fight this war the way you would fight it, Elena said. We will use methods that might disturb you. We will make choices that civilized species consider unthinkable. We will do whatever it takes to win. General Kethvar stood up, his scales bright red with anger. You ask us to hand control of our fleets to a species that has never fought a real war. Humans have only had conflicts on your own world. You know nothing of space combat. Elena nodded. That is true, General. We have never fought in space before. But we have fought for survival on Earth for millions of years. We know how to fight enemies that are bigger, stronger, and more advanced than we are. She looked directly at the Saurian general. Your species evolved on a world with gentle weather and abundant food. You developed technology to make your lives more comfortable. Humanity evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. We developed technology to help us kill our enemies first. Elena turned to address the entire chamber again. The Catherians have never faced an enemy that thinks like humans do. They have conquered species that fight with honor and follow ancient traditions. They have never fought a species that sees war as just another survival problem to solve. This is madness, whispered Commander Schill. You speak of abandoning everything that separates us from mere animals. Animals survive, Elena said simply. Civilized species become extinct. The silence stretched on for long minutes. Elena could see the delegates struggling with her words. These species had built their entire societies on the idea that civilization meant rising above primitive instincts. The thought of deliberately returning to those instincts horrified them. But they were also terrified of the Catherians. and they were running out of options. Finally, Counselor Prime Vex Na spoke. If the Council agrees to this proposal, what would humanity need from us? Complete authority over all military operations, Elena said without hesitation. Access to all intelligence about Catherian capabilities, and a promise that you will not interfere with our methods, no matter how disturbing you find them. And if we refuse? Admiral Chen asked. Elena's smile returned, cold and predatory. Then you will lose this war, she said. The Catherians will eventually reach every council world. Your civilizations will be destroyed or absorbed, and humanity will retreat to Earth and prepare for the day when they come for us too. She looked around the chamber one more time. But when they do come for us, they will face an enemy that does not care about fighting fairly. They will face a species that learned to survive by being more dangerous than anything else on our world. Elena walked back to her seat, leaving the council delegates to discuss humanity's offer. She knew the vote would be close. Many species would refuse to accept human leadership. They would rather lose with honor than win through methods they considered barbaric. But Elena also knew that fear was stronger than pride. The Catherians were coming, and traditional methods had failed. Soon the council would have to choose between their principles and their survival. And when they made that choice, the galaxy would learn why humanity had clawed its way to the top of Earth's food chain. They would learn what it meant to fight an enemy that had nothing left to lose. The war was about to change, and somewhere in the void between stars, ancient things that had slept for millennia began to stir in response to the chaos that was coming. Captain Marcus Shaw stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the tactical display show enemy positions in the Epsilon Reticuli system. The Council had given humanity command of the war effort 3 months ago. The vote had been closer than Elena expected, but fear of the Catherians had won in the end. Now Shaw was about to prove whether humanity deserved that trust. "Report, Commander Hayes," Shaw said to his second-in-command. Commander Sarah Hayes looked up from her station. She was young for her rank, but she had earned her position during the border wars on Earth. Those conflicts had taught humanity valuable lessons about fighting enemies with superior technology. Catherian biofleet detected at the edge of the system, Hayes reported. 37 primary vessels, estimated crew of 40,000. Their ships are showing the standard organic configurations we studied in the archives. Shaw nodded. The Catherian ships looked like massive sea creatures made of metal and flesh. They moved through space like living things, flowing and shifting rather than flying in straight lines. Each ship was unique, grown rather than built, with weapons that evolved during battle. "What about the Council observers?" Shaw asked. "Admiral, Chen's task force is holding position at the designated coordinates," Hayes said. "The Saurian and Etherian fleets are standing by as requested. They have orders to observe only unless we specifically request assistance." Shaw smiled grimly. The alien allies were nervous about human tactics. They wanted to see how humanity fought before committing their own forces. That was fine with Shaw. He preferred to work without interference from species that thought war should be polite. "Lieutenant Torres, status of the minefield?" Shaw called to his weapons officer. "All charges placed and armed, Captain," Torres replied. "The gravitic mines are positioned at the 3 most likely hyperspace exit points. If the Catherians drop out of FTL where our computers predict, they will emerge directly into the field. Other human ships in the fleet were small compared to Council vessels. Earth's technology was primitive, but humans had learned to use it efficiently. The ships were fast, maneuverable, and built for tactics that no other species would consider." "Captain," called Ensign Kim from the communications station, "the Catherians are sending a message on the standard diplomatic frequency." "Put it through," Shaw said. The main screen shifted to show a Catherian commander. The alien was tall and pale, with elongated limbs and features that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. Cybernetic implants covered half its face, and its eyes glowed with an unnatural light. "I am War Singer Thessian of the Catherian Empire," the alien said. Its voice sounded like music, but there was something wrong with the harmony. "I address the primitives who dare to challenge our advance." Shaw stepped forward so the alien could see him clearly. "This is Captain Marcus Shaw of the United Earth Fleet," he replied. "You are in violation of Council space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Thessian made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your species fascinates us, humans," Thessian said. "We have studied your pathetic attempt at civilization. You fight wars on your own world with primitive weapons. You have never faced true power." The Catherian leaned closer to the camera, its glowing eyes focusing on Shaw. "We will add your minds to our collective consciousness," Thessian continued. "Your thoughts will serve the Empire for eternity. Your bodies will be improved and given purpose in our fleets." "Counteroffer," Shaw said calmly. "Surrender now and we will make your deaths quick and clean." Thessian's expression changed. The flowing features hardened into something more recognizably angry. "You mock us? Your tiny ships cannot threaten vessels that have conquered 1,000 worlds." "We will see," Shaw said. "Shaw out." The communication ended, leaving the bridge quiet except for the hum of the ship's systems. Shaw turned to his crew. "All ships, this is Shaw. Execute Protocol Alpha on my mark. Remember, we are not here to fight fair. We are here to win." Shaw watched the tactical display as the Catherian fleet began its approach. The bioships moved in a formation that had been successful against Council forces dozens of times. They arranged themselves in a spiral pattern that allowed their psychic warriors to support each other while their weapons covered all angles of attack. "Hyperspace signatures detected," Torres reported. "The Catherians are preparing to jump to close combat range." This was the moment Shaw had been waiting for. Council forces always met their enemies in open space, fleet against fleet in what amounted to naval battles fought with energy weapons. It was civilized, predictable, and completely ineffective against the Catherians. Humanity had different ideas about how to fight. "Mark," Shaw said quietly. The first part of Protocol Alpha began immediately. Instead of meeting the Catherians in battle, the human fleet scattered. Ships broke formation and fled in different directions, moving at maximum speed away from the enemy. Shaw could imagine the confusion on the Council observer ships. To them, it looked like humanity was running away before the battle even began. The aliens had probably expected as much from a primitive species. The Catherians were confused too. Thessian's fleet pursued the fleeing humans, but they could not catch all the ships at once. The bio-vessels split up, chasing different targets across the star system. That was exactly what Shaw wanted. "Phase 2, Shaw ordered. The human ships that had fled toward the outer system suddenly reversed course. But instead of returning to fight, they began deploying equipment they had carried in their cargo holds. Sensor buoys, communication jammers, and most importantly, gravity well generators. Within minutes, the entire star system became a maze of artificial gravity fields and electronic interference. The Catherian ships found themselves cut off from each other, unable to coordinate their psychic attacks or maintain their formation. "Phase 3, Shaw said. Now the real fight began, but it was not the kind of fight the galaxy had ever seen before. The human ship UES Vengeance, commanded by Captain Rodriguez, was being pursued by a Catherian bio-cruiser 3 times its size. Instead of turning to fight, Vengeance led the alien ship through an asteroid field where the humans had placed hidden kinetic charges. The explosions did not destroy the Catherian ship, but they damaged its living hull and confused its biological sensors. While the bio-cruiser was trying to heal itself, Vengeance doubled back and launched a spread of nuclear missiles. But these were not ordinary nuclear weapons. The warheads had been modified with a virus that attacked biological systems. When They detonated against the Catherian hull. The explosions spread infection through the ship's living tissue. Captain Chen, commanding the UES Retribution, faced a different challenge. His ship was smaller and faster than his opponent, but the Catherian vessel was trying to get close enough to use its psychic weapons on his crew. Chen's solution was simple and brutal. He activated his ship's self-destruct system and aimed Retribution directly at the Catherian bioship. The alien commander, assuming no sane being would sacrifice their own life to win a battle, did not take evasive action until it was too late. Retribution's nuclear reactor overloaded just as the ship struck the Catherian vessel. The explosion tore through both ships, killing everyone aboard, but it also took out one of the most dangerous enemies in the Catherian fleet. Shaw watched the battle unfold from his position near the system's primary star. The Defiance was running silent, hidden in the solar radiation, while other human ships drew the Catherians into carefully prepared traps. "Captain," Hayes reported, "we are receiving surrender requests from 3 Catherian vessels. Their bioships are too damaged to continue fighting." "Denied," Shaw said without hesitation. "Continue the attack until all enemy vessels are destroyed." Hayes looked surprised. In civilized warfare, surrender was always accepted. Prisoners were treated according to ancient codes of honor that all species respected. "Sir," Hayes said carefully, "the Council Accords require us to accept surrender when offered." Shaw turned to face his second-in-command. His expression was cold and hard. "Commander, the Catherians do not take prisoners. They absorb captured crews into their collective consciousness. They turn enemy civilians into breeding stock for their bioships. They have never shown mercy to anyone they have defeated." Shaw pointed at the tactical display, where burning Catherian ships were, still trying to escape. "We will not give them the chance to regroup and attack again later. This is not a civilized war, Commander. This is extermination." The final phase of the battle was the most disturbing for the Council observers. As the damaged Catherian ships tried to retreat, the human fleet hunted them down one by one. There were no dramatic duels or honorable last stands. The humans simply destroyed every enemy vessel they could find, using whatever methods were most efficient. When Thessian's command ship tried to escape through hyperspace, it found that the humans had mined all the jump points. The bioship was torn apart when it tried to enter FTL while surrounded by gravitic distortions. The battle ended after 6 hours. Every Catherian vessel was destroyed. The human fleet had lost 8 ships and nearly 3,000 crew members. But they had achieved something the Council forces had never managed: a complete victory with no enemy survivors. Shaw stood on his bridge looking at the debris field that had once been a Catherian battle fleet. His communications officer was receiving messages from the Council observer ships, but Shaw ignored them for now. "Damage report," he ordered. "Hull breaches on decks 7 and 12, Torres reported. "Engineering reports the reactor is running at 60% efficiency. We will need major repairs before the next engagement." "Casualty report," Shaw asked Hayes. 47 dead, including Captain Chen and his entire crew. Hayes said quietly. 138 wounded. Medical teams are working to save as many as they can." Shaw nodded. The losses were heavy, but they were acceptable. In civilized warfare, such casualties would be considered a disaster. For humanity, they were the price of victory. "Captain?" Ensign Kim called from communications. "Admiral Chen is requesting permission to come aboard. The Council observers want to discuss the battle." Shaw sighed. He had been expecting this. The aliens would want to understand how humanity had achieved such a decisive victory. They would also want to express their concerns about human methods. "Grant permission," Shaw said. "And Kim, prepare a full battle report for transmission to Earth. Command needs to know that our tactics work against Catherian bioships." An hour later, Shaw found himself in his ready room facing Admiral Chen and 3 other Council officers. The crystalline Vorthak's body was flickering with nervous energy. The Saurian colonel kept changing colors. Even the normally calm Etherian diplomat seemed disturbed. "Captain Shaw," Admiral Chen began, "we must discuss what happened during the battle." "What would you like to discuss?" Shaw asked. "We destroyed an entire Catherian fleet with minimal losses. I would call that a successful engagement." "You refuse to accept surrender," said Colonel Thress, the Saurian officer. "You hunted down retreating enemies and destroyed them without mercy. This violates every principle of civilized warfare." Shaw leaned back in his chair and studied the alien officers. They looked genuinely shocked by what they had witnessed. These beings had spent their entire lives believing that war could be conducted according to civilized rules. "Colonel," Shaw said finally, "how many battles have you won against the Catherians using civilized methods?" Thress's scales shifted to a darker color. "That is not the point. There are standards that separate us from barbarians." "No," Shaw said firmly. "There are standards that help you feel good about losing. The Catherians do not follow your rules. They enslave prisoners and corrupt captured worlds. Why should we treat them with mercy they have never shown?" "Because we are better than they are," said Commander Ilya, the Etherian diplomat. "Because maintaining our principles is more important than victory." Shaw stood up and walked to the viewport that showed the debris field outside. Pieces of Catherian bioships drifted among the wreckage of human vessels. "Commander," Shaw said without turning around, "how many council worlds have the Catherians conquered while you maintained your principles?" The question hung in the air. No one answered. Shaw turned back to face the alien officers. "The Council has been fighting this war for 3 years using civilized methods," he said. "You have lost 60 star systems and billions of lives. You have followed all your ancient codes of honor, and you have been steadily losing." He walked back to his desk and sat down. "Today, humanity fought one battle using uncivilized methods. We destroyed an entire enemy fleet without losing a single engagement. We suffered casualties, but we achieved complete victory." Shaw leaned forward, looking each alien officer in the eye. "So tell me, which approach actually protects innocent lives? Following rules that help you lose slowly, or breaking rules that help you win quickly?" Admiral Chen's crystal body stopped flickering. "You present a logical argument, Captain, but there must be limits. There must be some standards we maintain. The only standard that matters is protecting our people from extinction," Shaw replied. "Everything else is luxury we cannot afford." The meeting continued for another hour, but Shaw could see that the aliens were beginning to understand. They did not like humanity's methods, but they could not argue with the results. After the council officers left, Shaw remained in his ready room, staring out at the stars. He knew that word of this battle would spread quickly through both the council and the Catherian Empire. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity fought differently than any species they had encountered before. But Shaw also knew that this was just the beginning. The Catherians would adapt to human tactics, just as they had adapted to every other enemy. The war was far from over. And somewhere in the deep void between galaxies, ancient things that had slept for millennia were beginning to wake up, drawn by the scent of a conflict unlike any the galaxy had seen in 10,000 years. Dr. Sarah Chen knelt in the dust of a dead world, carefully brushing dirt away from ancient stone carvings. The planet had once been called Zerion Prime, home to a civilization that had vanished over 8,000 years ago. Now it was just another archaeological site in a galaxy full of mysteries. But Sarah was not here for normal research. She was hunting for information about something the Council databases barely mentioned, something called the Black Armada. The carvings on this wall were different from anything she had seen before. The symbols were carved deep into the stone and filled with a black substance that seemed to absorb light. Even her powerful work lamps could not illuminate the markings clearly. "Professor Chen," called her assistant, Marcus Wright. He was a young man who had volunteered for this mission despite its dangers. "I found something you need to see." Sarah stood up and walked over to where Marcus was working. He had uncovered a section of wall that showed a clear picture carved in the ancient style. The image made Sarah's blood run cold. The carving showed ships that looked like they were made of pure darkness. They had no clear shape, but seemed to flow and shift even in the static stone image. Around these dark vessels, smaller ships burned and died. At the bottom of the image, words were carved in the old universal language. "Can you read it?" Marcus asked. Sarah nodded slowly. She had spent years studying the dead languages of extinct civilizations. This particular script was from the first Galactic Empire, a civilization that had ruled most of the galaxy before mysteriously disappearing. It says, "When war consumes the light of reason, the devourers answer the call." Sarah read aloud. "They who feast upon conflict itself shall rise. From the void to silence all who disturb the peace of eternity." Marcus frowned. "That sounds like a warning, not a historical record." "It is both," Sarah said grimly. She had been finding similar warnings on a dozen different worlds over the past 3 months. All of them spoke of the same thing. Ancient. Ships that awakened when galactic warfare reached a certain level of intensity. Sarah's communicator beeped with an incoming message. She activated the device and saw the face of Admiral Zhang, the human officer coordinating archaeological research for the war effort. "Dr. Chen," Admiral Zhang said, "we need you to return to Earth immediately. The situation has become urgent." "What has happened?" Sarah asked. "The war is escalating beyond our projections," Zhang replied. "General Rodriguez has implemented new tactical doctrines that are proving extremely effective against the Catherians, but our deep space sensors are detecting movement in the void between galaxies." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. "What kind of movement?" "Large objects moving at significant fractions of light speed," Zhang said. "Objects that do not appear on our instruments except as areas where starlight simply disappears. The science. Council wants to know if your research has found any reference to such things." Sarah looked back at the carved image of the dark ships. "Admiral, I need to transmit some data to you immediately, and I recommend that you order all human commanders to exercise extreme caution in their operations." "Why?" Zhang asked. "Because I think we may have awakened something that has been sleeping for 10,000 years. 2 days later, Sarah was standing in the war room on Earth, surrounded by military officers and government officials. The wall screens showed tactical displays from across the galaxy, where human forces were winning battle after battle against the Catherians. General Patricia Rodriguez stood at the center of the room, pointing at various combat zones. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and scars from the border wars. Her reputation for ruthless efficiency had made her the perfect choice to lead humanity's war effort. "Operation Cleansing Fire has exceeded all expectations," Rodriguez was saying. "We have retaken 15 star systems in the past month. The Catherians are retreating on all fronts." Sarah watched the displays with growing concern. The human victories were impressive, but they were also brutal. She could see reports of biological weapons, psychological warfare, and tactics that would horrify the Council allies. "General," Sarah interrupted, "may I ask about the methods being used in these operations?" Rodriguez turned to look at the archaeologist. "Dr. Chen, your research is valuable, but military tactics are not your area of expertise." "Actually, they are relevant to my findings," Sarah said firmly. "The ancient warnings I have discovered all mention the same trigger for awakening the Black Armada. Warfare that exceeds certain parameters of violence and scope." Admiral Zhang stepped forward. "What exactly are you suggesting, Doctor?" Sarah activated her tablet and projected images from her research onto the room's main screen. The assembled officers stared at the ancient carvings and translated texts. "Every extinct civilization I have studied mentions the Black Armada," Sarah explained. They describe ships that exist in the void between galaxies, waiting for galactic warfare to reach a critical threshold. She pointed to specific symbols in the carvings. According to these records, the Armada awakens when three conditions are met. First, the war must involve multiple star systems simultaneously. Second, the conflict must include the use of weapons that corrupt or transform biological life. Third, the warfare must be conducted without regard for traditional limitations on violence. The room became very quiet. Sarah could see understanding dawn on the faces around her. Our current operations meet all three criteria, Sarah continued. We are fighting across dozens of systems. We are using biological weapons and viruses designed to attack Catherian bioships. And we have abandoned all conventional rules of warfare. General Rodriguez crossed her arms. Dr. Chen, are you suggesting that we should allow the Catherians to win because of some ancient superstitions? I am suggesting that we may have awakened something far worse than the Catherians, Sarah replied. Something that views all warfare as a threat to galactic stability. Admiral Zhang pulled up the sensor reports from the void between galaxies. The objects our deep space arrays detected are moving toward our galaxy at approximately 15% of light speed. If they maintain that velocity, they will reach the outer rim in approximately 6 months. What do we know about these objects? Asked Colonel Martinez from the Special Operations Division. Sarah brought up another set of images on the screen. These showed ancient artwork from multiple civilizations, all depicting the same horrifying scene. According to the records, the Black Armada consists of ships from the first galactic civilization, Sarah explained. They were transformed by millennia of warfare into something beyond biological life. The texts describe them as hunger made manifest, and the silence that follows the storm. She paused, looking around the room at the grim faces of Earth's military leadership. They exist to prevent any single conflict from growing large enough to threaten the stability of the galaxy, Sarah continued. They do this by destroying all participants in the war, regardless of which side they support. General Rodriguez studied the ancient images carefully. What are their capabilities? The records are vague, but they describe weapons that unmake matter at the quantum level, Sarah said. Ships that absorb all forms of electromagnetic radiation, and crews that have transcended physical existence to become something like living entropy. Admiral Zhang frowned. How were they defeated in the past? They were not defeated, Sarah said quietly. According to every record I have found, the Black Armada has never been stopped once it begins moving. Previous galactic wars ended when all participants were eliminated. The room fell silent except for the hum of electronic equipment. On the tactical displays, human forces continued their advance against the Catherian Empire, unaware that their success might have doomed the entire galaxy. General Rodriguez, Admiral Zhang said finally, I recommend that we immediately contact our forces in the field. We need to scale back our operations until we better understand this threat. Rodriguez shook her head. Admiral, we cannot stop now. We have the Catherians on the run for the first time in this war. If we pull back, they will regroup and counterattack. If we continue, we may trigger the complete destruction of galactic civilization, Sarah warned. Dr. Chen, Rodriguez said, firmly, your research is fascinating, but it deals with events that happened thousands of years ago. We are fighting a war that is happening right now. She turned to address the entire room. The Catherians have enslaved billions of people and destroyed entire civilizations. They will not stop until they control the galaxy. We cannot allow ancient fears to prevent us from protecting innocent lives. Sarah felt frustration building inside her. These military officers were thinking like soldiers, focused on the immediate threat while ignoring the larger consequences of their actions. General, with respect, you are not understanding the scope of this danger, Sarah said. The Black Armada does not distinguish between aggressor and defender. They will destroy human forces and Catherian forces equally. Then we will fight them too, Rodriguez replied. Humanity has faced extinction before. We survived by being tougher and more adaptable than our enemies. Admiral Zhang looked troubled. General, perhaps we should at least inform our allies about this potential threat. Absolutely not, Rodriguez said quickly. The Council forces are already nervous about our methods. If we tell them that our success might awaken some mythical ancient enemy, they will demand that we return to their failed defensive strategies. Sarah realized that the general was not going to listen to reason. The human military had tasted victory for the first time in this war, and they were not willing to give it up based on archaeological evidence. Admiral Zhang, Sarah said, I request permission to continue my research with expanded resources. If the Black Armada is truly awakening, we need to learn everything we can about their capabilities and weaknesses. Granted, Zhang replied. Take whatever personnel and equipment you need. As the meeting broke up, Sarah gathered her research materials with a heavy heart. She understood the general's position, but she also knew that the ancient warnings were not superstition. Too many civilizations had left too many consistent records for the Black Armada to be mere legend. Over the following weeks, Sarah threw herself into her research with desperate intensity. She visited archaeological sites across Council space, often working in systems where the war was still raging. The ancient records painted a consistent picture of a force that existed solely to prevent galactic warfare from reaching critical levels. Meanwhile, human forces continued their devastating campaign against the Catherian Empire. General Rodriguez had implemented what she called total war doctrine, which abandoned all restraints on weapons and tactics. Human ships used biological agents that turned Catherian biovessels against their own crews. They deployed nanoscale weapons that corrupted Catherian cybernetic implants. Most disturbing of all, they had begun using captured Catherian psychic warriors as weapons against their own people. The results were undeniably effective. The Catherian Empire was collapsing faster than anyone had thought possible. But with each victory, the human methods became more extreme and more ruthless. Sarah watched the war reports with growing dread. The level of violence and technological corruption was exactly what the ancient warnings described as the trigger for the Black Armada's awakening. Her fears were confirmed when deep space sensors detected the first signs of arrival. Dark objects began appearing at the edge of the galaxy, moving inward with inexorable purpose. They did not respond to any attempts at communication. They simply absorbed all electromagnetic radiation directed at them, creating areas of absolute darkness. In space, the Black Armada was coming home after 10,000 years of slumber, and when they arrived, they would find a galaxy at war in ways that violated every ancient limitation on violence and destruction. Sarah sent one final report to Admiral Zhang, detailing everything she had learned about the approaching threat. Then she began preparing for the possibility that galactic civilization was about to face its greatest test. In the deep void between star systems, ships older than most civilizations moved steadily toward the inhabited galaxy. They had awakened to the scent of warfare that exceeded all parameters of acceptable conflict. They were coming to restore the silence of eternity, no matter how many worlds burned in the process. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with growing horror. The first Black Armada vessels had reached the outer rim of the galaxy 3 days ago. Since then, they had destroyed everything in their path, with casual efficiency that defied understanding. Report from the Kepler Defense Fleet, his communications officer announced. All 12 vessels destroyed, no survivors detected. Chen's crystal body dimmed with despair. The Kepler fleet had been one of the most powerful formations in Council space, equipped with the latest defensive technology. The Black Armada had eliminated it in under 10 minutes. Any word from the human forces in that sector? Chen asked. The U.S. Defiance attempted to engage the enemy, came the reply. Captain Shaw's ship was destroyed with all hands. The human escort vessels retreated after taking heavy casualties. Chen processed this information with growing dread. If the human fleet could not stand against the Black Armada, then nothing in the galaxy could. The ancient enemy had arrived with technology that made even Catherian bioships seem primitive. The main screen activated, showing a communication from Earth. General Rodriguez appeared, her face grim but determined. "Admiral Chen," Rodriguez said without preamble. "We need to coordinate our remaining forces immediately. The Black Armada is not discriminating between human and council vessels. General, our preliminary reports suggest that conventional weapons are completely ineffective against these entities," Chen replied. "Energy weapons simply disappear when they strike their hulls. Kinetic projectiles pass through them as if they were not there." Rodriguez nodded grimly. "Our analysis confirms your observations. The Black Armada ships seem to exist partially outside normal spacetime. They can interact with our universe when they choose to, but our weapons cannot consistently affect them." On Chen's tactical display, new reports were arriving every few minutes. Black Armada vessels had appeared in 17 different star systems simultaneously. They moved through space in perfect formation, ignoring all attempts at communication, while systematically destroying every military vessel they encountered. "General," Chen said carefully, "perhaps it is time to consider alternative solutions to this crisis." "Such as?" Rodriguez asked. Chen's crystal body flickered with nervous energy. What he was about to suggest went against every principle of civilized warfare. But the situation had moved far beyond normal considerations. Dr. Chen's research indicates that the Black Armada awakens in response to warfare that exceeds certain parameters, Chen said. "Perhaps if we cease all military operations and attempt to negotiate—" "Negotiate with what?" Rodriguez interrupted. "The Black Armada has not responded to any communication attempts. They attack human and Catherian forces equally. This is not a political conflict, Admiral. This is an extinction event." Chen knew she was right, but the alternative was almost unthinkable. "Then what do you propose?" Rodriguez's expression hardened. "We fight. We adapt. We find a way to win." "With what weapons?" Chen asked. "Our most advanced technology cannot even scratch their hulls." "Then we develop new technology," Rodriguez said simply. "Humanity has faced extinction before. We survived by refusing to accept defeat." The communication ended, leaving Chen alone with his desperate thoughts. The general's confidence was admirable, but Chen had seen the sensor readings from the encounters with the Black Armada. Their ships defied known physics. They seemed to absorb energy attacks and convert them into fuel for their own systems. Kinetic weapons passed through their hulls without causing damage. Even nuclear explosions merely created brief flashes of light before being absorbed into the darkness. A new alert sounded on the bridge. Chen looked at the tactical display and felt his crystal matrix nearly shatter with shock. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we are receiving a communication. Request from a Catherian vessel." "Which vessel?" Chen asked, though he could hardly believe what he was hearing. "The flagship of Warsinger Thessian," came the reply. "The same commander who led the attack on Epsilon Reticuli." Chen stared at the display in amazement. Thessian's bioship was approaching the Council fleet under a flag of truce. The Catherian Empire had been humanity's bitter enemy for over 3 years. Now they were requesting a meeting. "Put them through," Chen ordered. The main screen shifted to show Thessian's pale, elongated features. The Catherian commander looked different than before. The arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "Admiral Chen of the Council Forces," Thessian said formally. "I request permission to communicate with the human military leadership." "For what purpose?" Chen asked. Thessian's glowing eyes flickered with what might have been desperation. "The Black Armada has destroyed 6 of our core worlds and eliminated over half of our battle fleets. Our bioships are as helpless against them as your vessels," Chen, felt a strange mix of satisfaction and concern. The Catherians were finally experiencing the fear they had inflicted on so many other species. But if even their advanced biotechnology could not stand against the Black Armada, the situation was truly hopeless. "What are you proposing?" Chen asked. "An alliance," Thessian said bluntly. "Our peoples have been enemies, but we face extinction from a common threat. The Black Armada will not stop until all warfare in this galaxy has been eliminated. That means destroying everyone who has participated in any military conflict." Chen considered this carefully. The idea of allying with the Catherians was repugnant, but it might be the only way to survive the next few days. "I will relay your request to General Rodriguez," Chen said finally, "but I cannot speak for human command decisions." 3 hours later, Chen found himself in an unprecedented situation. His flagship was docked with both a human battle cruiser and a Catherian bioship. In the conference room, representatives of 3 species that had been at war for years were now discussing cooperation against a common enemy. General Rodriguez had arrived personally, accompanied by Captain Hayes and Dr. Sarah Chen. Thessian brought 2 other Catherian commanders and a being that looked more machine than organic. The council delegation included Admiral Chen, Colonel Thress, and Commander Ilya. "Let me be clear about our situation," Rodriguez began without ceremony. "The Black Armada has destroyed everything we have sent against them. Traditional weapons are useless. Traditional tactics are meaningless. We need new approaches." Thessian leaned forward, his pale features serious. "Our bioships have capabilities that your technology lacks. We can interface directly with living systems. We can adapt our weapons during combat. But none of this matters against an enemy that exists partially outside normal space." Dr. Sarah Chen activated a holographic display showing her research data. According to the ancient records, the Black Armada consists of ships from the first galactic civilization. They were transformed by warfare into something beyond normal matter. She pointed to specific sections of the translated texts. "The records describe them as hunger made manifest," Sarah continued. "They feed on conflict itself, growing stronger with each battle they fight. But they also suggest a possible weakness." Everyone in the room leaned forward with interest. "The ancient texts mention that the Black Armada exists to maintain the silence of eternity," Sarah explained. "They awaken when warfare exceeds acceptable parameters, but they return to dormancy when the threat to galactic stability has been eliminated." "Meaning what exactly?" asked Colonel Thress. "Meaning they might withdraw if they believe the current conflict has ended," Sarah said. "But achieving that would require something unprecedented." Rodriguez frowned. "What kind of unprecedented?" Sarah looked around the room at the assembled representatives of 3 species that had been killing each other for years. "It would require the complete cessation of all military operations by every faction in the galaxy," she said. "Not just a temporary truce, but a genuine end to the war itself." The room fell silent. Chen could see each delegate struggling with the implications of Sarah's suggestion. "You are asking us to surrender to our enemies," Thessian said finally. "I am asking you to choose survival over victory," Sarah replied. "The Black Armada does not care who wins this war. They will destroy all participants equally." Commander Ilya spoke up. "Dr. Chen, even if we agreed to such a proposal, how could we trust our enemies to honor it? The moment one side begins rearming, the others would follow." "Because none of us will survive long enough to rearm if we do not try this," Rodriguez said bluntly. "The Black Armada is eliminating our forces faster than we can replace them. At current rates, all 3 of our civilizations will be extinct within 2 months." Thessian's cybernetic implants flickered as he processed this information. "You propose a permanent end to hostilities between the Empire and the Council forces?" "I propose whatever it takes to survive," Rodriguez replied. "Our species can settle their differences later, assuming any of us live that long." Admiral Chen found himself in the strange position of mediating between his former enemies. The question is whether such a cessation would actually work. Dr. Chen, do the ancient records provide any details about how the Black Armada determines when a conflict has ended? Sarah consulted her tablet, scrolling through translated texts from dozens of extinct civilizations. The records are not specific, she admitted, but they suggest that the Black Armada monitors galactic warfare through methods we do not understand. They seem to detect not just military actions, but the intent to continue fighting. Meaning they would know if we were planning to resume hostilities after they withdraw, Rodriguez said. That is the implication, Sarah confirmed. The delegates spent the next several hours working out the details of an unprecedented agreement. A complete cessation of military operations by all factions. The withdrawal of all armed forces to designated neutral zones. Most difficult of all, the establishment of monitoring systems to ensure that no side was secretly preparing for renewed conflict. It was an agreement that would have been impossible under any other circumstances. Only the threat of complete extinction could force such bitter enemies to consider genuine peace. But even as they negotiated, reports continued to arrive of Black Armada victories. The ancient ships moved through the galaxy like a plague, destroying everything in their path with weapons that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. Sir, Chen's communications officer interrupted the meeting. Priority message from the Outer Rim defense stations. Chen activated the communication system. The face of a terrified human officer appeared on the screen. This is Captain Williams, of the Defense Platform Alpha, the officer said. The Black Armada has broken through all outer defenses. They are moving toward the core systems at maximum speed. Estimated time of arrival at Earth, 72 hours. The room became deadly, quiet. Everyone understood what this meant. They had less than 3 days to implement their unprecedented alliance, or all of their civilizations would be destroyed. Captain Williams, Rodriguez said, relay the following message to all human forces. Cease all offensive operations immediately. All ships are to withdraw to the coordinates I am transmitting now. She turned to Thessian. Warsinger, will your empire honor this agreement? Thessian's glowing eyes met hers. The Empire will comply. Our survival depends on it. Admiral Chen activated his own communication system. All Council forces, this is Admiral Chen. Implement immediate ceasefire protocols. All vessels are to stand down and withdraw to neutral positions. As the orders went out across the galaxy, the 3 former enemies could only hope that their desperate gamble would work. The Black Armada was coming, and conventional warfare had proven useless against them. Now they would discover whether the ancient enemy could be satisfied with the promise of peace, or whether the galaxy was truly doomed to silence. The ceasefire held for exactly 18 hours. Admiral Shaw, commanding the joint Human-Catherian Council fleet from his new flagship, watched the tactical displays with growing desperation. Despite the unprecedented alliance, despite the complete cessation of hostilities between the former enemies, the Black Armada continued its relentless advance toward the core systems. Status report, Shaw ordered his communications officer. The Black Armada has destroyed the Centauri defense grid and the Vegan shipyards, came the reply. They are not slowing down. Current projections show them reaching Earth in 48 hours. Shaw felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. The ancient enemy was not interested in peace. They had come to end the war by ending everyone who had participated in it. The main screen activated, showing the faces of his unlikely allies. Warsinger Thessian appeared from his bio-ship, his pale features tense with barely controlled fear. Admiral Chen's crystal body flickered with agitated energy from the Council flagship. The cessation of hostilities has failed, Thessian stated bluntly. The Black Armada continues to eliminate our forces despite our alliance. Dr. Chen's interpretation of the ancient records was incorrect, Admiral Chen added. The Black Armada is not interested in ending the current conflict. They intend to eliminate all species capable of warfare. Shaw nodded grimly. He had been expecting this outcome. In his experience, desperate situations rarely had easy solutions. Then we return to the only option we have left, Shaw said. We fight. With what? Thessian demanded. Our most powerful weapons cannot penetrate their defenses. Their ships absorb our energy attacks and ignore our kinetic projectiles. Shaw leaned forward, his expression becoming intense. War Singer, you said your bioships can interface with living systems. Can they interface with non-living systems as well? Thessian frowned. Our biological technology can integrate with certain types of machinery. Why do you ask? Because I have an idea, Shaw said. Something so dangerous that even my own species would consider it madness. Admiral Chen's crystal body pulsed with nervous light. Admiral Shaw, what are you proposing? Shaw activated his tactical display, showing the positions of all remaining forces in the galaxy. Human ships, Catherian biovessels, and council fleets were scattered across dozens of systems, all retreating before the Black Armada's advance. We have approximately 40,000 warships remaining between all our forces, Shaw said. Individually, they are useless against the Black Armada. But if we could coordinate them perfectly... He paused, letting the implications sink in. You want to concentrate our entire fleet for a single massive engagement, Thessian said. That would be suicide. The Black Armada would destroy us all at once instead of piecemeal. Not if we do it right, Shaw replied. The ancient records mention that the Black Armada exists partially outside normal space-time. But that means they must have some kind of anchor point in our reality. Shaw brought up Dr. Sarah Chen's research data on the main display. Dr. Chen, you studied every reference to the Black Armada in the archaeological record. Did any of the texts mention how they maintain their existence in our universe? Dr. Chen appeared on the screen from her research ship. She looked exhausted but determined. There are references to nodes of darkness that anchor their fleet to normal space, she said. The ancient texts describe them as points where space-time itself has been corrupted by eons of warfare. Nodes that can be destroyed? Shaw asked. Theoretically, yes, Sarah replied, but it would require an enormous amount of energy focused on a very specific point in space-time, the kind of energy that could only be generated by... She stopped, understanding what Shaw was suggesting. By detonating every remaining warship in the galaxy simultaneously, Shaw finished, in a precisely coordinated pattern that would create a cascade failure in local space-time. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the background hum of ship systems seemed to fade as the three commanders processed what Shaw was proposing. You are talking about the complete destruction of all military forces in the galaxy, Admiral Chen said finally. Every ship, every crew, every weapon system. Yes, Shaw said simply. That would include our own vessels, Thessian pointed out. We would all die in the attempt. Yes, Shaw repeated. And there is no guarantee that such an attack would actually work, Chen added. No, Shaw admitted. There is no guarantee of anything except that we will all die anyway, if we do nothing. Shaw stood up and walked to the viewport of his ship. Outside, he could see the running lights of Allied vessels from 3 different species. Ships that had been killing each other just days ago were now flying in formation, united by desperation. War Singer Thessian, Shaw said without turning around. Can your bioships create a psychic network that links all 40,000 vessels? Something that would allow perfect coordination of their self-destruct sequences? Thessian was quiet for a long moment. Such a network would require the voluntary participation of every crew member on every ship. The psychic strain would be enormous. Many would die from the mental feedback alone. Admiral Chen, Shaw continued, can your crystal technology calculate the precise timing needed to create a space-time cascade? Something that would propagate through multiple dimensions simultaneously. Chen's body flickered rapidly as he processed the mathematical requirements. The calculations are possible, but they would require the combined processing power of every AI system in our fleets. The computational load would burn out most of our computer cores. Shaw turned back to face his allies. Dr. Chen, based on your research, what are the chances that this plan would actually destroy the Black Armada? Sarah looked at her data for several minutes before answering. Based on the ancient texts and our current understanding of their technology, perhaps 20%. And if we do nothing? Shaw asked. 0% chance of survival, Sarah replied immediately. Shaw nodded. Then we proceed with what I designate as Protocol Omega, the complete destruction of all military forces in a coordinated attack designed to damage space-time itself. Over the next 24 hours, the most complex military operation in galactic history began to take shape. Human engineers worked alongside Catherian biotechnicians to create hybrid systems that could link organic and mechanical technologies. Council scientists collaborated with Earth physicists to calculate the precise positioning needed for each vessel. The plan required every ship to position itself at a specific point in space, timed to the nanosecond. The Catherian psychic network would coordinate the crews, while the Council AI systems calculated the optimal detonation sequence. Human tactical doctrine would provide the underlying strategy. Shaw found himself working more closely with his former enemies than he ever had with his own allies. The urgency of their situation had stripped away all pretense and politics. They were no longer human, Catherian, or Council. They were simply the last hope for galactic civilization. Admiral, his communications officer announced, the Black Armada has reached the Sol system. They are beginning their attack on the outer defense platforms. Shaw looked at the tactical display showing his home system under assault. Earth's mighty defense grid, built over decades with the best technology humanity could produce, was being systematically destroyed. Each platform died without managing to inflict any damage on the attackers. How much longer do we need? Shaw asked his tactical team. 12 more hours to complete the positioning calculations, replied Commander Hayes. The ships are moving into formation, but the coordination requirements are incredibly complex. We do not have 12 hours, Thessian interjected from his bioship. The Black Armada will reach Earth itself within 6 hours. If they destroy the planet, billions of humans will die. Shaw felt the weight of command pressing down on him. Every decision he made now would determine whether galactic civilization survived or died. There was no margin for error, no second chances. We implement Protocol Omega in 6 hours, Shaw decided. Ready or not. The next few hours passed in frantic preparation. Ships that had been designed to fight each other were now linked together, in an intricate web of technology and telepathy. Catherian bioships merged their organic systems with human computers and Council crystal matrices. The resulting hybrid network was unlike anything that had ever existed. Shaw stood on his bridge, watching reports from across the galaxy as 40,000 warships moved into their assigned positions. Each vessel was now a precisely placed component in a weapon designed to wound space-time itself. Admiral, Dr. Chen's voice came through the communication system. I have completed my analysis of the ancient texts. There is something you need to know about Protocol Omega. What is it? Shaw asked. The weapon we are creating will not just destroy the Black Armada, Sarah said quietly. It will scar several star systems permanently. The space-time damage will create areas where normal physics no longer apply. Entire regions of the galaxy may become uninhabitable. Shaw absorbed this information without changing expression. How many systems? Potentially dozens, Sarah replied. The cascade effect is unpredictable once it begins. Shaw looked around his bridge at the crew members who had volunteered to die with him. Young men and women who would never see their families again. Officers who had given up everything for a chance to save their species. The alternative is the destruction of all intelligent life in the galaxy, Shaw said finally. We proceed, The final hour arrived with devastating news from Earth. The Black Armada had broken through the planet's defenses and was beginning the systematic elimination of all life on humanity's homeworld. Billions of people were dying while Shaw watched, helplessly from across the galaxy. "All ships report ready," Commander Hayes announced. "The psychic network is stable. AI systems are synchronized. Detonation sequence calculated and programmed." Shaw activated the fleet-wide communication system. His voice would be heard on every ship in the combined armada, translated into dozens of languages, and transmitted through both technological and psychic channels. "This is Admiral Shaw to all vessels," he said. "Today we face the end of everything we have fought to protect. The Black Armada threatens not just our civilizations, but all future possibility of life in this galaxy." He paused, looking out at the stars one last time. "We go now to our deaths, but we do not go quietly. We go as warriors of three species who chose to stand together when the universe itself turned against us. We go knowing that our sacrifice may save billions of lives we will never meet." Shaw took a deep breath. "Execute Protocol Omega. All ships detonate on my mark." The psychic network carried the countdown through 40,000 minds simultaneously. Human determination, Cytherian resolve, and council logic merged into a single purpose. Mark. Across dozens of star systems, 40,000 warships exploded simultaneously. The detonations were precisely timed and positioned to create a cascade, effect that propagated through multiple dimensions of space-time. The weapon worked exactly as planned. The coordinated explosions created a massive disruption in the fabric of reality itself. Space-time buckled and twisted around the Black Armada's anchor points, trapping their vessels in collapsed dimensional bubbles. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Black Armada found themselves facing an enemy they could not simply absorb or ignore. The space-time damage created by Protocol Omega existed outside their ability to interface with normal reality. The ancient ships, caught in the cascade failure of local physics, were effectively erased from existence, not destroyed in any conventional sense, but removed from the universe entirely. The victory came at a terrible cost. Every military vessel in the galaxy was gone. Millions of crew members had died in the coordinated detonation. Entire star systems were now scarred by space-time anomalies that would persist for millennia. But galactic civilization survived. In the aftermath, as the survivors surveyed the devastation, a new understanding emerged among the species of the galaxy. They had learned that their greatest strength lay not in their individual technologies or tactics, but in their ability to unite against existential threats. The war between humanity, the Cytherian Empire, and the Council forces was officially ended by mutual agreement. The three species, having faced extinction together, found that their previous conflicts seemed petty in comparison to what they had survived. Admiral Shaw's final message, transmitted in the seconds before Protocol Omega was executed, became the foundation for a new galactic constitution. We have learned that desperation can make any species capable of anything. Today, we chose to be capable of sacrifice, cooperation, and hope. May future generations remember that the galaxy belongs to all who call it home. The galaxy would never forget the day when humanity entered the battle and the Black Armada stirred once more. It would also never forget the day when three species chose to die together rather than live apart in fear. In the deepest classified archives of each surviving civilization, a single entry was made. Protocol Omega successful. Black Armada contained. The price of peace is eternal vigilance, and sometimes eternal sacrifice.